What's going on, Walking Dead fans? My name is Clumsy Noname, and today I'm bringing you my first ever What If for the TellTale Walking Dead games. In this video, I'm going to be seeing what happened if Duck lived. This specific video will be a part 1 and will only focus on Season 1, Part 2 will be about Season 2, Part 3 will be Season 3, and Part 4 will be Season 4, respectfully. If you like this video and want to see those parts, I'll probably make them either way even if this video doesn't do well, then be sure to leave a like, and if you have any other what-ifs you want me to do, then leave a comment below. I have plenty ideas. I literally have a whole Google Doc sheet of ideas I can do, so I won't run out soon, but still leave them just in case. One thing that I would like to mention is that technically if Duck stayed around, I'm sure a lot of the decisions and stuff that happens in the game would turn out a lot differently. But for the sake of keeping the games roughly the same, we're going to say that a lot of the main story points still have to happen, and I'll explain how Duck being there will still make those points happen. Because like if Duck is still there, then I mean realistically you might not ever make it to the lodge in Season 2, but we're still going to make it so they get there eventually. Now I won't bore you any further, let's go into Season 1, Episode 3. So in this scenario, I'm going to say that Katja gets bit instead of Duck, not just none of them get bit. I'm going to say Katja gets bit instead. Everything that happens in the motel happens normally, but then whenever they're in the RV, whenever Katja and Kenny call Lee up to tell him about Duck's bite, they'll instead tell him about Katja's bite. The reasoning for taking so long to tell him, because they'd been driving a while, was because they were waiting for Duck to sleep because they don't want Duck to know yet. Everything else will still happen normally until you get to the train. Lily will either still be with you, or you abandoned her on the side of the road. Whenever you get to the train though, instead of Duck just laying down on Katja and being all depressed and dying, he will be up and about talking, and you can even have conversations with him. Duck will get some candy from Chuck, and Clementine will make a comment about his ADHD because, let's be honest, Duck has ADHD. This will also make Duck just act really energetic, and there will probably be a scene about him like running around in circles or something. By this point, Lily will have left if you didn't leave her on the side of the road, and then everyone starts the train and everyone gets on the train and everything happens normally. Now on the train, Chuck's comment about Clementine dying happens earlier before Katja or Duck or anyone dies because Duck isn't dying in this scenario and Katja feels well enough to keep going. Everything will happen the same with this scene, except Duck will ask Katja if he is allowed to shoot too. Ultimately, the decision will come down to Lee, as Katja says she trusts Lee's judgment. If you choose to allow him to shoot, it will just slightly extend the scene, and you'll also train him how to shoot while Katja watches. After Lee does everything that Chuck told him about, Katja will suddenly pass out. Everyone except for Lee starts freaking out, but Lee can make the choice to either ask Chuck or Ben to keep an eye on the situation while he goes and gets Kenny. If you ask Ben, it counts towards you being on his side later on whenever everyone has to go with you to find Clementine and Savannah, and if you ask Chuck, it counts towards Kenny points. Lee is now talking to Kenny, and he is in as much denial as he was whenever Duck was bitten also. However, before it gets to the fight/conversation scene, a gunshot is heard ringing out. Whoever you chose to keep an eye on the situation is standing outside of the boxcar with Duck and Clementine. If Ben was trusted, Kenny would make a comment about how the kid is watching his kid. If Chuck was trusted, Kenny would make a comment about why the Candyman is watching his kid. Either way, Ben or Chuck will say that Katja woke up and asked them to step out before hearing the gunshot. Lee and Kenny will then walk into the boxcar and see Katja now shot in the head, obvious that it was suicide. Kenny will break down and ask that Duck is not allowed in. If Ben was keeping an eye on the situation, then Chuck would still be in the train car whenever Katja commits suicide, leading to Kenny to not question him much. If Chuck was trusted with the kids and Ben is still inside of the train car, then Kenny will go off on Ben asking how he could let her do this, and Ben will just freak out and be like, I don't know, I'm sorry. If Lee sided with Kenny during the Larry death, Kenny will ask Lee to keep an eye on Duck for as long as it takes, to which Lee can agree or pass the responsibility on to Chuck. If Lee agrees to watch him, it gives him brownie points for Kenny coming with him later during Savannah. If Lee sided with Lily during the Larry death, Kenny will just ask Chuck. Lee will then go up and stop the train. The train will slowly make a stop up to the petroleum tanker where you get stopped in the actual game, and instead of Kenny getting out, he stays in the boxcar with Katja. Everybody besides Kenny still gets out, including Duck, and gets confronted by Krista and Omid. Lee will climb up the ladder, and if he is watching Duck, then Clementine and Duck both will climb up the ladder with Lee. If Duck is up here, Krista will point out that Lee is neither Clementine nor Duck's father, and Lee will explain that he is just watching Clementine, and Duck's father is in the train car, not giving any more details, as Duck still does not know what has happened to his mother. If Chuck is watching Duck, then Crystal will point out that Lee is not Clementine's father and look at the group and say that she hopes that's not Duck's father either, referring to Chuck. Lee will then explain that Duck's father is in the train car, still not adding more as to keep Clementine's mind safe because she doesn't really know either. Kristen and Omi join the group still, and Lee and Clementine go over to the train station and everything happens as normal. Or, if Duck is being watched by Lee, he will end up joining them. If Duck joins Lee, then Lee has the option to either send Clementine or Duck into the train station's locked room behind the gate. When the two walkers attack, Lee, instead of defending himself, will have to focus on saving whichever kid is still on his side of the gate. He eventually kills the two walkers, but then the sequence will have a few more quick time events than normal. Then the walker on the other side of the gate will appear, and if Duck is sent over to the other side, Clementine will have reached under the gate, grabbed the gun, and shot the walker, saving Duck's life. If Clementine is sent over and Duck has received gun training, he will do the same, shooting the walker, saving her life. If Clementine is sent over and Duck hasn't received the gun training, the scene will play out as normal, with Clementine opening the gate and Lee shooting the walker. Whenever Lee returns from the train station in either scenario, he will see Kenny standing outside of the train car. He discloses with Lee that he is done grieving and ready to bury the body, but is unsure if he should let Duck say his goodbyes or just bury her. Lee can then make the choice. If Duck is allowed to say his goodbyes, there will be an emotional scene of Kenny breaking the news to Duck and Duck saying his goodbyes to his mom's dead body. Lee then helps bury the body with Chuck's shovel. If Duck isn't allowed to say his goodbyes, it just cuts straight to Lee helping bury the body with Chuck's shovel. If Lee encourages Kenny to let Duck say his goodbyes, this will give him brownie points later in Savannah. After the petroleum tanker is dealt with and the train is moving again, if Duck wasn't allowed to say his goodbyes, then Kenny will break the news to him now in a new scene added right before the ending scene of the episode. Duck will become emotional and upset, but be comforted by Kenny. If Duck was allowed to say his goodbyes, the ending scene is as usual. If Duck wasn't allowed to say his goodbyes, then the ending scene where the radio is revealed as working is only discovered by Lee as he is driving the train while Kenny comforts Duck. That marks the end of episode 3, and already there's been quite a bit of changes. Duck can either have gun training now or not, and Katja is now dead, and Duck knows no matter what, although you got a choice if he got to say goodbye to her body or not. In this alternate scenario, there is also no time for Ben to disclose to you that he was the one who gave the stuff to the bandit, so Lee has no idea. Moving on to episode 4, if Kenny wasn't with Lee when the walkie-talkie was discovered as working, he finds out with everyone else while on the streets after the bells ring in Savannah. In this scenario, Duck and Clementine will both be standing by Ben before eventually being abandoned by Ben and saved by Chuck, separating Chuck from the group still. Whenever the group gets into the backyard of the house, Kenny gets mad at Ben for leaving Duck to die. Ben will say he got scared and didn't know what to do. Lee can either ask Kenny to calm down, or if Lee agrees with Kenny, Crystal will calm the situation down. Whenever Lee digs the dog up, Kenny will make Duck stay away from the dog, making a remark about their family dog, Franklin. Now inside, whenever Lee gets confronted about the walkie-talkie working, if Kenny was with Lee, everything happens as normal. If Kenny wasn't with Lee, then depending on if Lee just agreed with Kenny outside and said that Ben was stupid for leaving Duck to die, Kenny will make a remark saying he doesn't care and trusts Lee. If Lee calms the situation down outside instead, Kenny will have a short scene saying how he doesn't know if he can trust Lee anymore. After searching the house, Kenny will still find the boy in the attic, and Ben asks Lee to go up there still to check on him. Kenny is sad and tells Lee that this is what could have happened to Duck instead of Katja, but due to not having Duck's death trauma, he just kills the boy himself. This leads to Lee and Kenny both going outside to bury the boy. Kenny will then make a comment saying how many graves they'll have to fill. This also leads to both Kenny and Lee seeing the stranger outside the gate, and if Lee stays silent whenever having the option to yell at the stranger, Kenny will yell instead. Either way, everything else will happen as normal until Lee and Kenny go to find a boat. Now, Lee will have the option to take Clementine and Duck with them. If Duck has received gun training, he will insist to his father that he is ready. This is the first time Kenny is hearing of this gun training, but after hearing that Katja said it was okay, he is fine with it. If Duck did not receive the training, Kenny will say he doesn't feel the best about them coming, but still lets Lee make the decision. If Lee doesn't let them come, the scene happens exactly the same until Clementine would show up, but also with Duck. If Lee does let them come, the scene will happen exactly the same until Molly shows up. Molly, instead of attacking the group, will instead approach the group and say they aren't from Crawford. In this scenario, Kenny still tries to sneak up behind her as he was working with the boat when she showed up, and the gun still goes off, causing the herd to come. No matter which choice is picked, Clementine or Duck are still here now, and this leads to Molly, Clementine, and Duck getting up on the balcony, but Kenny, not having enough time, is forced into the sewer with Lee. Whenever they make it into the sewer, Kenny will make a remark being upset that they had to trust their kids with a complete stranger. Lee and Kenny will run into Chuck's dead body, and Kenny will make a comment saying, "So long, Muffin Man." Lee and Kenny will make their way into the morgue where Vernon points a gun at them. The cancer group will make a remark about Kenny saying, "Look at him, of course he's from Crawford due to his redneck status." Unlike the actual game, Lee will not get the choice to threaten or talk down the group. Instead, Kenny will make the choice based off of if Duck got to say his goodbyes to Katja or not. If Duck did say his goodbyes, Kenny will talk them down. If Duck did not get to say his goodbyes, Kenny will threaten the group. Either way, it leads to Vernon agreeing to help take Lee and Kenny back to the house after learning that they have kids. When they return to the mansion, Kenny and Duck will reunite, and Molly will say Clementine is around here somewhere, and the reason they got back was because Clementine knew where they came from. Kenny getting drunk will be cut out due to him caring for Duck now, and Duck will say he last saw Clementine in the backyard. Lee will find Clementine in the shed with the boat, and Kenny and Duck will start working on the boat. Whenever the group has to go to Crawford to look for supplies, if Lee chooses to take Clementine along, Kenny will take Duck, saying he doesn't want to leave Duck alone with Omid. If Lee chooses to leave Clementine, Kenny will leave Duck behind and state he either trusts him with Clementine, or if Duck was gun-trained, Kenny will state that he trusts Duck now. If Duck was gun-trained and left home alone, Kenny will leave a gun with Duck instead of with Clementine. If Clementine and Duck stay home, everything happens the same at Crawford. If Clementine and Duck come to Crawford, Duck will stay in the control room with Clementine for the majority of the segment. Whenever Ben states that he is responsible for Katja's death, Lee is surprised, but so is Duck because Duck is now there. If Duck is brought along, has gun training, then Duck will shoot the walker holding Ben in the bell tower and make it so there is no possible way to save Ben. If Duck is brought along and has no gun training, the scene will still play where Lee gets to make the choice. Essentially, if Duck received gun training and came to Crawford, Ben is dead no matter what, and you get zero choice about the matter. If Duck caused Ben's death, then when the group gets back to the house, Kenny will state that he's proud of Duck for getting rid of that shitbird Ben. Clementine will be upset at this and run out of the room. If Duck caused a Ben's death, Lee can get the option to talk to Duck before talking to Clementine and either agree with Duck's choice, stating that Ben caused Carly/Doug's death indirectly, or disagree with Duck's choice, saying that all lives are precious. Clementine still runs away/gets kidnapped, looking for her parents, and Lee gets bit. Duck will now go and search for Clementine if Kenny goes, because Kenny doesn't want to leave him alone. If Kenny decides not to go, then Duck will make a remark that he thinks his dad is wrong, but will still stay with his father. If Ben and Kenny and Duck go, Duck will be just as displeased as his father that Ben is going, but ultimately they still go. And that marks the end of episode 4. Honestly, if this did happen, it would be crazy, because this could be Duck's first human kill. He technically didn't directly kill Ben, it's not like he shot Ben, but he got Ben killed by shooting the zombie and then makes it so Lee doesn't have enough time to reach Ben in time. In this scenario, it also gives Lee a lot more bonding time with Kenny, which if you like Kenny is a good thing, or if you aren't on good terms with Kenny, it makes Kenny just upset at you. So let's get into episode 5. All options that I'm about to list will only be if Kenny and Duck go. If Krista and Omid goes with them, Krista will cut off Lee's arm no matter what. If it is Kenny, Duck, and Ben, then Kenny will cut the arm off and Duck will stand back by Ben. If it is only Kenny and Duck, then Kenny will cut the arm off, but Duck will be standing near them to try and help. After coming back from the morgue, if Kenny and Duck stayed behind and Duck didn't receive gun training, then Kenny will be beat up, but Duck will be fine. If Duck did receive gun training, Kenny will beat up and Duck will also be a little beat up, with Kenny stating that Duck gave them hell, but they still stole the boat. If Ben was not killed by either you or Duck in episode 4, then Ben will still have his rant towards Kenny, but Duck will still give him the stink eye. The walkers then break into the house and force the group into the attic. If Duck is gun trained, then the group's bullet count will go up from 11 to 13 and Duck will help defend, but won't make much difference in the long run. Now in the attic, Kenny will still get mad at Lee, but depending on if Kenny and Duck went with you or not, Duck will side with either you or Kenny. If they went with Lee, Duck will side with Lee and tell his dad that he's out of line, in which case Kenny will throw the statue at the wall out of anger. Kenny will then apologize to Duck, with Kenny saying he doesn't want to end up like his father, as it was hinted in other scenes that Kenny's dad might have been abusive. If they didn't go with Lee, then Duck will side with his dad and either Lee or Kenny can throw the statue in the actual game. If Lee throws it, this will upset Duck that Lee got angry, but Kenny will convince Duck that Lee didn't mean it and forgive Lee. If Kenny throws it, then Duck will be happy that his dad threw it, but Kenny will realize what kind of example he is setting and apologize to Lee and tell Duck he regrets it. The group will then make it into the next room with the suicide couple where Duck will either be upset or not care depending on if he got to say goodbye to his mom or not. If Duck did not get to say goodbye to his mother, then he will be visibly upset, asking Kenny if that's what Katja looked like. Kenny will also be sad and just nod. If Duck did say goodbye, then he would still be sad but not have much to say about it. Instead of Kenny picking up the gun in this scene though, Lee will pick up the one-bullet gun that they had instead. If Ben is still alive by this point, then Ben will still be the last to cross and fall, as adding Duck wouldn't add too much weight, I don't think, to the balcony, and Ben will still be the only one to fall. Kenny, now with Duck, wouldn't be willing to sacrifice himself, and instead Lee will either have the choice to leave Ben or attempt to save him. If Lee chooses to try and save Ben, he will open the gate and go over to Ben. There will be a couple quick time events to try and lift Ben off, but ultimately it is impossible to save Ben in time. You now have a choice as Lee to either shoot Ben to put him out of his misery or leave Ben to turn. Regardless if Ben was saved or not, the scene where the radio falls into the hole still happens. But instead of the radio falling in, Duck will trip and fall into this hole. Kenny will immediately jump down there and help Duck up, but not before getting surrounded by the walkers. Kenny will shout out, "I'll find you, Duck," before going silent. Lee shouts into the hole while Krista and Omid hold Duck, who is crying. The group now decides that whenever Clementine is found, they must meet back by the train, as that is most likely where Kenny would go. And with this, Duck will agree to go on with Krista and Omid. Now at the sign, Krista, Omid, and Duck will be separated from Lee. Everything past this point will happen exactly the same. The only thing changing is if Lee decided not to use the bullet on Ben, or if Ben died in episode 4 and Lee never used the bullet in the first place. This now will give Lee the option to not give up his weapons to the stranger, and he will have the gun on him whenever the fight happens. Lee will get the option to shoot the stranger from his chair, making it so the strangling scene never happens, and it essentially just makes the stranger fight go a whole lot quicker. After this, Lee dies and Clementine makes it out of that whole thing, but in the final scene, Clementine will see 3 figures instead of 2, one of which is a child figure, which is obviously Duck, Krista, and Omid. Season 2 will open with Omid, Krista, Clementine, and Duck all walking together while Krista and Omid are talking about baby names. Duck will suggest that the child be named Omid Jr., as Duck's real name is Kenny Jr. They all make it to the public restroom, as in canon, where Omid and Duck will head off into the woods to pee, and Krista still goes into the other bathroom saying she's going to be waiting for Omid to return. While Clementine is in the bathroom, the stranger comes in and tries to rob her. Omid will come in, and instead of the door closing on Omid, Duck will instead walk in after Omid and start talking, not realizing what's going on. The stranger will suddenly turn around and shoot Omid before Krista comes in and shoots the stranger. 16 months later, Krista, Clementine, and Duck are in the woods. As in the actual game, Krista is still really salty here because she secretly believes Clementine and Duck are the reason behind Omid's death. She doesn't really blame them, but she just always has it in the back of her mind, and I don't know. You can tell in the actual game. She then leaves to go find more firewood. Clementine will find the photo of Lee in her backpack, while Duck will now have the drawing Clementine made of Kenny, Duck, and Katja, as Clementine gave it to him as a gift. If in Season 1, Duck did get to say goodbye to his mom, then he will burn the drawing, stating that he doesn't need it anymore and feels he has closure. If he did not get to say goodbye to his mom, he will hold on to it, saying he can't bear to lose his family again. Soon Clementine and Duck hear a noise and find Krista being held at gunpoint. Whether they choose to distract or run, it doesn't matter, as both Clementine and Duck will end up falling into the river after being chased. Clementine will wake up on the riverbank alone and call out to Duck, but not hear any response. She will eventually make her way to Sam the dog. Clementine will find the can of beans, and, as in canon, this causes Sam to attack her. Instead of the fighting sequence with the dog, Duck will hear the scuffle and run into the camp and throw the dog over the log. This will cause the dog to be impaled by the fence post. Clementine, as in the actual game, can choose to kill or leave the dog. Duck will encourage her, however, to put it out of its misery, bringing up his old family pet dog, Franklin. Duck will help Clementine walk through the woods before he sets her down by a rock after being surrounded by walkers. Duck will be surrounded in a similar sequence as Kenny was surrounded when he disappeared in Season 1. Before they get devoured, Luke and Pete come and rescue the pair. While heading towards their camp, Luke, before he sees the bite, will ask about Duck's name, asking if it's dodging or quacking, in a callback to Season 1, Episode 1. Duck will explain it was a nickname from his father, and his real name is Kenny Jr. Luke will notice Clementine's bite and drop her, with Duck running over to check on her. Clementine will say a dog bit her, with Duck backing her up. They will still remaining skeptical, saying that he could just be covering for her, but take them back to camp anyway. Clementine will still pass out, but won't wake up surrounded with a gun in her face, but will just be on the ground. Duck will be trying to convince them it's a dog bite, while most of the group says he's just a kid and doesn't know what he's talking about. Carlos will come over and take a look, but decides he can't figure out what it is and decides to keep her in the shed. The group gives Duck the choice to come into the house with them, but Duck will stay in the shed with Clementine to make sure she is alright. Clementine will find the hammer to break the board and go outside of the shed, and Duck will follow her outside the shed, but won't go inside of the house with her, stating he will keep lookout. Everything that happens in the house goes normally, and Clementine will meet Duck back in the shed, where Duck reveals he talked to Alvin and got her a juice box. Clementine can either thank him or say he's stupid for trying that. Either way, they get to work fixing Clementine's arm, and Clementine has a choice to have Duck put the stitches in or do it herself. Whichever way she chooses, if Duck went to help find Clementine in Season 1 and Lee cut his arm off, Duck will tell Clementine the story of Lee losing his arm. If that didn't happen, Duck will just default to a story about his childhood and give more backstory about him and Kenny's relationship. The walker will then break into the shed, and the fight happens about the same, with the only difference that Duck will hand Clementine the hammer, in a callback to Clementine handing Lee the hammer in Season 1, Episode 1. The cabin group still runs to the shed, and Clementine will have her still, not bitten moment, while Duck stands in the background with his arms crossed, looking cool. The group invites Clem and Duck inside, where Carlos confirms the bite was from a dog. Carlos will tell Clementine to stay away from Sarah, and Duck will ask about it, as he was outside when that happened. Clementine will explain it's another kid, and Duck will think that's cool. Luke will then come in and apologize to the kids, and as in the actual game, you can have a conversation about Lee, where if Lee lost his arm and Duck was there when he did, Clementine can say Lee lost his arm and Luke will ask more about it and Duck can explain more. Luke invites them to stay with the group as normal, where Duck will accept, telling Clementine they don't know how to survive on their own. Nick also will never come and apologize because in this scenario, Nick was never waving a gun in her face and didn't almost shoot her. Luke will then ask about Clementine's parents, and it will play out as normal, but then he will ask about Duck's parents. Duck will explain his mom got bit and took care of herself, and his father died trying to get Clementine back. When Luke asks what he means by get Clementine back, Clementine will then explain the whole situation about how she got lost. Pete walks in and tells the group it's time to go to bed, and Duck will leave with him while Clementine finishes eating. Rebecca will then come in and have her talk before fading to black and it being the next day. The next day, Pete, Clementine, and Duck are all walking to the fishing traps. Pete asks if anyone taught them how to shoot, and Clementine will say Lee. If in Season 1 Lee did teach Duck, Duck will say Lee taught him also. If in Season 1 Lee refused to teach Duck, Duck will say Krista taught him. Pete will still tell a story about Nick, and Nick will come over, but he won't get mad because he never almost shot Clementine and won't be like, "Oh, are you telling her this?" They all then get to the river where they see the bandits, and Clementine still spots one alive and asks where Krista is, but like in actual game, nothing is ever said. All of this leads to them getting surrounded by walkers, and Pete gets bit. Clementine still has the choice to go with Pete or Nick, and Clementine can also tell Duck to either come with you or go with the other person. And that ends Episode 1. So far there aren't any major deviations, but that's all about to change, possibly, depending on your choices. If Clementine goes with Nick by herself, everything happens as normal for now. If Clementine and Duck go with Nick, they easily get the door shut in the shed and Nick still asks why they chose to come with him, and you can answer as you'd like. But if you stay silent, Duck will state Pete got bit and he didn't think he would make it. They all go to bed until Clem and Duck get woken up by Nick smashing bottles against the wall. Nick will say he had to kill his mom, and Duck will get somber at this, and Nick will ask what's his deal, and Duck will say his mom got bit too. Nick will just say oh, but then carry on with the story about Luke and how they all will die. Nick will then ask them to take a drink with him where Clementine can choose for herself, but Duck will say yes. You can either call Duck out and he will stop, or encourage him, or stay silent and he will drink more. Whenever they all make a run for it, you will no longer have a choice to leave Nick behind, as Duck will force him to come no matter what. Now we're going back to the Pete storyline real quick. If Clementine goes with Pete by herself, everything happens as normal for now. If Clementine and Duck go with Pete, they will all go into the truck and get a breather. Pete will ask for the saw, and if Duck went with Lee in Season 1 to get Clementine and cut off his arm, Duck will say it might not work. But Pete will say he had a cousin and it did work with him. If Duck did not go, or Lee did not cut his arm off, Pete will just ask for the saw as normal. Pete will then ask the duo to make a fire with the cardboard boxes and cigarettes in there, and Clementine can either agree or refuse, but Duck will do it regardless. Pete will then say he's going to cut the leg off and that they're going to have to cauterize his wound and he might pass out. Clementine has a choice here to agree to help or not, and if she decides not to help, Pete and Duck won't go through with it as they don't think it's possible, but they don't blame Clementine, stating she's probably right. If this happens, everything will happen as normal for the rest of the truck, with Pete helping them escape but eventually dying. If Clementine does decide to help, Pete will cut through the leg narrowly before passing out, and Clementine and Duck will move his stump into the fire, cauterizing the wound. They then wrap Pete's leg with any type of extra bandage/shirt they have. Clementine will then pick Pete up, and as Duck is a little older now and has gotten a lot stronger since Season 1, will help carry him back to the lodge with the help of plot armor, because this is TellTale. If Clementine left with Nick alone, then she will make it back to the cabin where Duck, Carlos, and Rebecca will all be there. Duck will say that Pete didn't make it, and Clementine will say Nick was last seen at the shed. Rebecca and Carlos will then leave and leave Clementine and Duck in charge of Sarah. If Clementine and Duck left with Nick, then they will make it back to the cabin where Carlos and Rebecca ask where Pete was, and Nick will say he's dead. Carlos, Rebecca, and Nick will then go out to look for Luke and Alvin while Clementine and Duck watch Sarah. If Clementine went with Pete alone, she will come back to see Duck, Carlos, and Rebecca. Duck will say Nick got left at the shed while drunk and he couldn't convince him to leave. Clementine will say Pete got left at the truck and she's unsure if he's still alive as he got bit and had to leave behind. Carlos and Rebecca will then go out to find Nick, Luke, and Alvin, leaving Clementine and Duck to watch Sarah. If Clementine and Duck went with Pete but didn't decide to amputate, they will get back to find Carlos and Rebecca and say they don't know where Nick is and Pete got left behind at the food truck while bit. Carlos and Rebecca will go out to find everyone while Clementine and Duck watch Sarah. If Clementine and Duck went with Pete and decided to amputate, they will show up at the cabin where Carlos will immediately clear the kitchen table and put Pete on it. Rebecca will then have her attitude be like, "What did you do?" And Clementine can either defend herself or stay silent, where Duck will defend the decision. Carlos will inspect Pete's wound and say the blood loss is definitely slowing due to the cauterization, but only time will tell. Carlos will move Pete's body over to the couch, and Carlos and Rebecca will still go out to find everyone, leaving Clem and Duck to watch Sarah and watch over Pete's unconscious body. Regardless of whatever choice you made, Clementine and Duck will go upstairs to say hi to Sarah. This will be Sarah's first time meeting Duck and will ask Duck if he wants to be her friend. Duck will say yes, and if Clementine agreed to be her friend, Sarah will say she now has 2 friends. If Clementine did not agree to be her friend, Sarah will say she's happy to finally have someone who wants to be her friend. Now that Duck is her friend, Sarah will show you guys the gun no matter what and will ask Duck to teach her. Duck will say he's unsure and looks to Clementine for an answer. If Clementine says no or stays silent, Duck will say no and Sarah will put the gun away, sadly. If Clementine says yes, Duck will teach her the basics of how to use it. Carver will then show up to the cabin. If Pete was brought back to the cabin, Clementine and Duck will throw Pete and Sarah into the closet that Clementine snuck in through in episode 1. If Pete is not back, Duck will throw Sarah into that closet. Clementine and Duck will then go open the door where Carver asks their names. If Clementine is honest and says Clementine, Duck will remain honest and say Duck. If Clementine lies and says Carly, Duck will lie and say Doug. If Clementine remains silent or asks his name, Duck will tell Carver their real names. Carver will then ask if anyone else is around, and if Clementine stays silent, Duck will say it's just them. If Clementine says it's just them and their dad, Carver will say you two don't look like siblings, and Duck will say he got found by Clementine and her dad. Carver will then ask if they've seen their group, and Duck will answer instead of Clementine, saying that's a lot of people to lose. They'll then go into the kitchen where Carver will call out their large amount of dishes and Duck will say that he has ADHD and forgets to do them sometimes. Carver asks where they're going, and if Clementine stays silent, Duck will say they've been here a while. They'll then leave the kitchen and Carver will see Carlos's shirt. But if you actually look, Duck and Carlos have really similar shirts. So Duck will lie and say that it's one he found that he could use when he's older. Instead of Carver hearing Sarah upstairs, he will hear her in the closet instead. Carver will go to open the door, but nobody will be there as Sarah and Pete are now under the house through the opening that Clementine snuck through. In this scenario, he also never finds the photo of Sarah because he will never go upstairs and look. He still will be suspicious of their story though and tell Duck and Clementine not to trust the Crabbin group and then leave. Clem and Duck then go to check on Sarah under the house and tell her it's fine to come out now, and if he brought Pete back, then Clem and Duck will help carry him up to the couch. The cabin group comes back, including Nick, no matter which scenario you picked at the beginning of the episode. If Pete is at the cabin, Carlos and Nick will go to check on Pete, where Carlos still says he's unsure if he'll pull through. Nick will thank Clem and Duck for bringing him back, though. Sarah will reveal Carver came to the cabin, and despite if you did a good job disguising your lie or not, Duck will say he thinks Carver saw straight through them. The group then decides to leave as normal if Pete was not saved. If Pete was saved, the group will say they have to leave, but they don't want to leave Pete behind. You will then hear a raspy breath from Pete saying, "We're burning sunlight," as he sits up on the couch. Nick will run over and hug Pete, and the group will then head out. In this scenario, we instantly go to the 5-day time skip, as we already know the fate of Pete/Nick either way. If Pete is alive, it is revealed they had a pair of crutches at the cabin that is helping him walk. The group will then come across the bridge, and Luke, Clem, and Duck will go to scout it out. Luke will still ask what the most important thing in life is and say family, and Duck will become saddened thinking of his father and mother. Luke will say sorry for bringing it up, and then they'll go to the bridge. The fighting Walker scenes still happen, but Duck makes the situation a little bit easier by helping out. They all then run into Matthew on the bridge, and he will ask what they want. You can then choose to state what you were doing or stay silent. And if you're silent, Duck will say what you're doing. Everything will happen as normal until the end of the conversation. Matthew will never notice Nick. Clementine will introduce herself, followed by Luke, and then Duck will say his name last. Matthew will then say, "Duck? Holy," and then get cut off by getting shot by Nick. Luke gets mad at Nick, but they still continue over to the small house. Alvin will ask Clem and Duck to go look around for food, and Duck will bring up the fact Clementine looks like the girl on the can before anyone else does. If Pete is still alive, he will state that he thinks Nick made the wrong decision shooting Matthew, but asks Clementine to forgive him as Nick was only doing what he thought was right. The group goes to the lodge where Duck climbs on top of the windmill instead of Clementine. Luke notices the group getting confronted, but asks Clem to get Duck down. Clementine gets Duck down from the windmill, and they both head over to the group, where it is revealed Kenny is alive. Duck will obviously run over and hug Kenny, and Clementine still has her choice to also do so or not. I think in this scenario, Kenny and Duck would both be crying, but Kenny would ask Duck if these people were with him, and Clem and Duck would say yes. Luke would ask what's going on, and Clementine would say that Kenny is Duck's dad. The whole group would act shocked, and Luke would say, "I thought he was dead," and Clementine would say, "Me too." Kenny then invites everyone inside. Once inside, the group will put their weapons down as Duck will vouch for the cabin group. Kenny, Duck, and Clementine would then go sit on the couch. Even though obviously Kenny is more thrilled Duck is alive than Clem, I think Kenny still would just want to take care of Clementine, seeing as they only just met these people recently. Kenny would talk to Duck a little first, saying, "Still wearing that dirty old shirt, huh?" And then turn to Clementine saying, "And you're still wearing that hat." He'd then ask about Lee if Lee cut his arm off, asking if it worked, and Clementine would say no. If Pete is alive at this point though, Duck will then add that it worked for Pete. He'd then ask about Krista and Omid, at which point either Clementine or Duck, depending on if you're silent or not, will talk about how Omid died and Krista was lost. Duck will then ask how Kenny lived, and Kenny will explain how he managed to get out of the building and went back to the train. Duck/Clementine would then explain that they also went back to the train, but they must have not waited long enough. Kenny will then explain how he went into a major depressive episode after losing Duck, not knowing if he was alive. But the thought of Duck being alive kept him going. And that's whenever he ran into Sarita. You could then probably do a funny dialogue of Kenny saying Sarita is Duck's new stepmom or something. Kenny will then ask Walter if Matthew has come back yet, and Duck and Clementine will exchange nervous glances. Walter then asks Clementine to help him make some food and give Duck and Kenny some time together. You can then go talk to Sarita, who will ask about Kenny and Duck. She'll then say she's never seen Kenny this happy. She'll then ask Clementine if she thinks Duck will like her, and Clementine has the option of saying yes or no. If you say yes, she'll be happy, and if you say no, she'll say she'll try not to get in his way. If Pete is still alive, he'll be upstairs with Carlos, Rebecca, and Alvin. You can then make a funny dialogue option asking why they dragged him upstairs, and Rebecca will say, "That's not funny." It'll then be dinner time, and you can choose to sit with Kenny or the cabin group, but either way, Duck will sit with Kenny. If you sit with the cabin group, they'll ask you about Kenny, which you can give your opinion on, and then ask you about Duck, who you can also give your opinion on. If you sit with Kenny, then he'll ask you and Duck on your opinions on the group. You can choose whatever you like, but Duck will always choose a more favorable stance on everyone. Whatever happens, it'll end up being you, Kenny, Duck, Luke, and Nick sitting together. They'll get into the argument about Wellington, and Duck will take Kenny's side and you can choose yours. Kenny obviously never calls you Duck in this scenario, as Duck is alive and next to him. Walter still will take you outside and ask what your plan is, but no matter what, Duck's plan will be to stay with Kenny. Kenny and Duck will join you outside and you'll all find Bonnie staring through your window. Duck will side with Kenny not to give the stranger supplies, but no matter what, Walter will do it anyway. After Walter does that, Kenny will send Duck and Clem inside while he talks to Walter. Here Luke will wave Clem and Duck over to tell them about Matthew being Walt's friend. If Pete is still alive, he will also be over here with Luke. If Pete is still alive here, he will tell Nick about it no matter what, making it so the player doesn't get a choice. If Pete is not alive, you can choose to tell Nick or not, with Duck following your lead. Duck and Clem will then go outside and find Walter with Matthew's knife. Duck will admit Duck will admit Nick did it no matter what. The only choice you have is to either say Nick is a good person or not. The windmill will then start spinning out of control and Duck will go with Kenny while Clementine deals with the windmill. Everything here plays out the same for a bit, with Nick dying or not, depending on if you told Walter he was a good person or not. This all leads to you either staying inside or going outside to find Kenny after Carver shows up. If you stay inside, then everything will happen as normal, besides when Kenny comes inside, it will be with Duck also. If Pete is alive, you can also hear some dialogue about Carver asking Pete about his leg, but Pete will say to go to hell. If you go outside with Kenny, everything happens as normal, except Duck will give his opinion to Kenny that he shouldn't take any of the shots, but Kenny will listen to you more. You, Duck, and Kenny will all come inside at the end when Carver grabs Sarita. And that marks the end of episode 2, which leaves us in a weird scenario where Pete can still be alive and Nick can be dead. At the start of episode 3, in the back of the truck, Kenny will start his plan to escape. Duck will agree with Kenny no matter what happens, except for one thing which I'll get to in a second. If Pete is still alive and Nick is dead, Pete will say nothing this entire truck ride as he is depressed. If Pete is still alive and Nick is still alive, Pete will talk and say he thinks Kenny's plan is stupid and actually will convince Duck not to agree with Kenny. But that is the only way Duck will not agree with Kenny. Either way, Kenny will still be mad and continue his plan. Whenever Rebecca brings up Luke being their only hope, if Pete is alive and Nick isn't, Pete will state that Luke abandoned them, showing that he lost hope. Whenever Carlos is taken by Troy when they arrive, if Clementine is not friends with Sarah, he will ask Duck to keep an eye on Sarah, as Duck is friends with Sarah either way. If Pete and Nick are alive, Reggie will state that it only costs them an arm and a leg to get to where they are, and Pete will laugh. If Pete is alive and Nick isn't, Reggie will make the joke and Pete will just glare at him before walking, or crutching, away. Kenny will pull Clem and Duck aside to say that he doesn't trust Reggie. Duck will state he also doesn't trust him. Clementine can choose to say she does or does not. If Clementine does trust him, Duck will go look around instead of Clementine, and this makes Clementine join the conversation with Kenny to distract Reggie. Clementine can choose to either stay silent or distract him, but does not get the option to rat Kenny out. If Clementine agrees and says that he is distrustworthy, Duck will state to Clementine that he is like Batman and she is like Robin in a callback to Season 1, and they will both look around and not find anything. It is now the next morning and Carver is talking to the group. If Sarah is friends with Clementine, everything will happen as normal, with Sarah getting in trouble and slapped by Carlos. If only Duck is friends with Sarah, Both Sarah and Duck will get in trouble. This causes Kenny to have to slap Duck. Kenny, of course, is against this, but then Troy holds a gun up against Clementine and Duck tells Kenny it's okay. Kenny will then slap Duck, but after seeing Carlos slap Sarah and not being able to comfort her, Kenny knows better than to try and comfort Duck and just sits there seething. The group will then get separated to do their tasks, and if Pete is still alive, then he will be with Bonnie in the ammo room. If Nick is dead, Pete won't talk much at all. If Nick is alive, Pete will talk about how Carver used to be a good man and used to be good to Nick, but now he's done unspeakable things. Clementine will then be called to the roof to pick berries. Duck and Sarah will also be there, with the reasoning being that they want the kids to be with Reggie picking berries. If Duck was also hit during the conversation earlier, he will tell Sarah that it's not that bad, and this will cause Sarah to be more manic. In this universe, Duck and Clementine will help Sarah and manage to complete their own tasks, because I think with Duck and Clementine they're capable to do their own and help Sarah at the same time. Reggie will now live and not be pushed off this roof as all the kids finish their job to Carver's standards. Clementine will still end up going outside and find Luke, who tells her to get a walkie-talkie before getting told to go up to Carver's office. During her conversation with Carver, Carver will state that Clementine is the future of society. He will make a remark about Duck, stating that Duck could have been just like Clementine, but Kenny is holding him back. If Kenny was forced to slap Duck, he will state he admires Kenny's restraint on comforting Duck. Clementine then returns to the group where Kenny is arguing against the group on how to escape this place, with Reggie taking the group side about getting Luke a radio. Kenny will then say, "Weren't you the one just saying we can't escape?" And Reggie will explain that he understands Carver's true nature now and realizes they need to leave. Eventually the group decides to do both, and Jane will bring up how they need to use guts to get through the herd. If Clementine chooses to bring up how Lee did that, Duck will be surprised. Clementine then gets the radio and comes back, and Kenny has a talk with Duck, telling him how proud he is of the man he's become. The next morning, the group still decides to put the radio in Clementine's pocket and bring it to the comic store. During the debate on who should take it, Mike will suggest Reggie, but Reggie will say he doesn't want to risk it because of his one arm. Clementine will try to get the radio to Luke before it gets revealed that Luke was captured. Carver will ask for the radio, and Kenny will still take the fall, now seeing Clementine as his own daughter in some ways. If Clementine chooses to go help Kenny, Duck and Clem will both run towards Carver, with Clementine getting hit by Troy and Duck getting knocked over by Carver before Carver goes back to beating Kenny. If Clementine restrains Sarita, Duck will be hit by Troy. Bonnie will then get Carver to go help with the breach or whatever that was going on, and Carver will tell Reggie to come with him, obviously not happy that Reggie was helping the people. Later that night, the group talks about their plan to escape, and if Pete is alive, it is brought up that he won't be able to walk through the herd. If Nick is alive, he will offer to help Pete through the herd. If Nick is not there, Mike will offer to help him through the herd. Luke will then suggest they might have to leave Kenny behind, with Sarita and Duck immediately saying no, but Kenny will wake up in time anyway, as in canon. Clementine then gets volunteered to go turn on the PA. If Alvin is alive, she will be told to go find Alvin and Reggie. If Alvin isn't alive, she will be asked if she can find Reggie. The PA scene will play out as normal, with Alvin either being there or not. Either way, he is now dead. Clementine will be on the roof when she hears a gunshot. She will enter the stockroom to see that Pete is now shot dead on the ground. Because this is TellTale, even if you get someone to survive through your choice, they're dead anyway. Carver will state, "Take this as a sign that I'm not messing around. Besides, he'd only slow you down anyway." As in canon, they take control of the situation, and Kenny will beat Carver's skull in anyway. I think Kenny is still mentally unstable enough to want to do this, as even though he has Duck in his life again, he did live almost 2 years thinking Duck was dead, and Carver immediately ruined his reunion with Duck. If Nick is still alive and Pete just died by Carver, Nick will now stay and watch Kenny kill Carver. Duck will stay and leave depending on Clementine's decision. Everything happens the same while leaving Howe's now that Pete is dead and Reggie is missing. The only thing changing from the original story is that Duck is here, and I think he's more than willing to go through it. Carlos will still die with Sarah running off into the woods, followed by Luke and Nick if he's alive. Sarita will then be held in place being bitten by a walker in the hand, but then the walker is revealed to be Reggie. Instead of Clementine getting the choice, Duck will instead choose to cut off her arm based on if Lee cut his arm off or not. If Lee cut his arm off, he will cut her arm off. If Lee did not, he will not cut her arm off. Additionally, if Pete was saved back in episode 2, this will also cause Duck to cut the arm off, even if Lee did not cut his arm off. And that marks the end of episode 3. So now Pete is dead no matter what, and Reggie is dead no matter what, even though we did get a little more screen time with them depending on their choices. Getting into episode 4, if Kenny and Duck went with Lee in season 1 and saw Lee cut his arm off, Kenny will look at Sarita and then look at Duck before running off without saying a word. If Kenny and Duck didn't go with Lee in season 1, but Duck still knows Lee cut his arm off / Pete got his leg chopped off, Kenny will be shocked and be like, "What did you do?" and then run off. If Duck did not cut the arm off, Kenny will run over and get Sarita before running off. In either scenario, Duck will go with Kenny whenever everyone gets separated. Everything else happens as normal until they get to the Civil War site where Kenny will already be inside of the tent with Sarita instead of sitting outside. Duck will be outside with Mike and Bonnie. In this scenario, they won't ask Clementine to go check on Kenny as they already tried to have Duck do it and Kenny didn't want to talk to Duck. It is implied Kenny had a similar reaction to Clementine as in canon, with Kenny getting angry. Duck will then join Jane and Clem on their search to go find Luke and Sarah, stating he needs some time away from his dad. On the walk to the trailer park, Jane will bring up how it's unlikely Luke and Sarah survived. But Duck will say it was also unlikely he'd ever see his dad again, and then tell Jane the story of how he reunited with Kenny. They will eventually run into a zombified Nick if he was saved in season 2. Episode 2, I'm dumb. Where Duck will offer to take care of Nick, and Clementine can choose to make Duck do it or do it herself. Jane will show Clem and Duck the knee trick on walkers, and Duck will use it on the next walker no matter what, even if Clem decides not to. Eventually, all three make it to where Luke and Sarah are at. With Duck here, it makes it slightly easier to hold the walkers off after they break in, but there's too many and Clem has to make the choice to leave Sarah or slap her. Duck will not be upset if Clementine leaves Sarah, stating he believes she did everything she could. When they get back, Kenny still hasn't moved from the tent, and the group asks Clementine to go check in on him, as they don't want to put Duck through that again. Duck will say that he would be fine to, but Bonnie will force Clem to instead. Throughout the conversation, if Duck cut off Sarita's arm, Kenny will imply he thinks it was Clementine's influence that made him do it. Clementine can either agree and say she would have done the same, or say she wouldn't have, but either way, Kenny will still be mad. Clementine can then make the argument that Duck did it because of Lee's amputation, or in the rare instance, because of Pete's amputation. Alternatively, she cannot explain herself, and Kenny will continue to think that she is the reason. Whether Clementine has defended herself or not, Kenny will still leave the tent with the reasoning he agrees to help with Rebecca's baby. If Sarah is still alive, Duck will stay with Sarah and keep an eye on her. If Sarah has died earlier in the episode, Duck will stay and help Kenny. Clem and Jane go over and either steal medicine or not from Arvo. If the medicine was stolen, upon returning, Clementine can offer some medicine to Rebecca. Duck will pull Clementine aside and ask where this medicine came from. Clementine will tell him the story. This prompts Duck to bring up Ben, stating the last time someone stole medicine, his mom got killed. In this scenario, Duck will refer to Ben as Shitbird Ben, showing that he's going to be more like his father. Clementine will then go and get Mike and Bonnie before returning back and moving the group up to the observation deck. They find Luke and Jane after their hookup, and Duck will agree with Kenny that it's stupid what they were doing. The walkers will get up on the deck, and Duck will help defend the deck, but it still gets overrun and eventually collapses with Sarah falling. Duck will insist they have to help her, but Clementine still gets the choice to tell Jane to try or not. If she decides not to, Duck will be upset, but ultimately understands. If she decides to, Sarah will still get eaten, but Duck will be appreciative that people tried to save her. The rest of the deck will fall, and Rebecca will then have her baby. Later that night, Rebecca will offer Clementine the chance to hold her baby, and when she is done, Duck will also hold the baby, regardless of if Clementine did it or not. Jane will then leave, and Duck will actually say he doesn't care and they don't need her, because who cares about Jane, exactly. The next morning, the group leaves, and eventually Rebecca will collapse on the tire exhausted. Arvo will show up, and Duck will ask if that's the guy she saw. If Clementine stole the medicine, Duck will make another comment about Ben, saying, he even looks as hopeless as that shitbird. The episode will still end with either Clem or Kenny shooting Rebecca, who has died, and starting the firefight between the Russians and the group. And that marks the end of episode 4. In this episode, I'm trying to create a little bit of tension between Kenny and Duck, if you couldn't tell, because we're trying to make it so if you do decide to do the ending of the game, which if you know, then it makes more sense. Going into episode 5, Duck will now be behind the cover with Luke, but other than that, nothing much has changed about the fight. Clem can either get the baby or not, but either way it doesn't matter because Luke will get shot in the leg and the baby will be safe. Now that the group has survived, Jane has returned, and the group has taken Arvo, they continue on their journey. Jane will tell Clementine that Kenny is going down a dark path and Clem and Duck are the only two who can bring him back. The group then takes a break after Luke's leg gives out. Duck will be with Kenny while Clementine has her conversations with everyone else. Clementine will then walk over to Duck and Kenny and see Duck changing Kenny's bandage. Clementine will then have the option to either look away or look at Kenny's wound. If Duck watched Kenny beat Carver, he will say that Carver definitely got what was coming with him, with Kenny agreeing. Kenny will suggest naming the baby Alvin Jr. here, and Duck will say something along the lines of, "Yeah, so he can just go by a nickname when he's older," referring to the fact that his real name is actually Kenny Jr., but he just goes by a nickname. The group eventually makes it to the power station, but Kenny will join everyone by the fire immediately as he wants to spend time with Duck, Clem, and AJ. The group will make a toast to the ones they've lost along the way, and Kenny and Duck will become saddened. During this time, Kenny will apologize to Clementine about any hurtful comments he has made towards her recently, and says to Duck he's sorry for not being the best. Duck will accept his apology, and Clementine has the choice to either accept or deny it. If she accepts it, Kenny is grateful, and if she denies it, Kenny will say he understands but plans to keep making it up to her. They all sleep, and the next morning the group will make their way to the lake and the house and decide they have to cross the lake. Whenever Arvo tries to run away, Kenny and Duck will both chase him, but I don't think they'll fall in because Duck is pretty small. This leaves Clementine and Bonnie still the only two who notice Luke fall in the ice. If Clementine has fallen into the water, Duck will tell Clementine to stay awake and say this isn't her first time falling into freezing water, making a reference to them falling in the river at the beginning of the game. Either way, Luke dies here, and maybe Bonnie dies here depending on your choices. The survivors then make it to the house where Kenny will start beating Arvo. Duck will agree with his father that this is the right choice. If Clementine tries to stop Kenny, Duck will stand in the way of her. This causes Kenny to stop and realize what he's teaching Duck, and he will just walk away from Arvo angrily. If Mike tries to stop Kenny, it happens as normally. Jane will then run in the room saying Arvo wasn't lying, but Duck will say it isn't about the food, it's about the deaths of those they loved. Eventually the group all calms down a bit and all decide they need to rest. Kenny asks Duck and Clementine to come help him fix a truck outside. Outside, Kenny will state his distrust of Jane, with Duck agreeing with him. Clementine can either agree or disagree, but either way, everyone drops the subject. Kenny will then suggest heading to Wellington. Duck will agree, and Clementine can either agree or disagree, but again, either way the subject gets dropped. Whenever Clementine goes inside, Duck will stay outside with Kenny. Jane will start talking to Clementine and state that Kenny is still heading down a dark path and is only becoming an even worse influence on Duck. Kenny gets the truck working and everyone will argue on where to go, with Duck agreeing with Kenny that they should go to Wellington and that they should leave Arvo behind. After the argument that everyone has, Kenny, Duck, and Clementine will all get inside of the truck to talk. The three can talk about Wellington again, where no matter what happens, they'll all just go inside and sleep for the night. Clementine will wake up being shaken by Duck, with Duck pointing out the window at Mike, Arvo, and Bonnie, if she is still alive, all standing by the truck. Clementine and Duck will walk outside and confront them. Eventually the encounter ends with Duck being shot, and then Kenny will run outside. In this scenario, Clementine is not hurt, and Clementine can choose to shoot Mike, Bonnie, and Arvo, or have the choice to let them run. If Clementine does choose to shoot, she will headshot Arvo, killing him instantly. If Bonnie is still alive, Kenny will shoot Bonnie, leaving Mike the sole survivor as he runs into the woods. If Bonnie is not alive, Kenny will shoot Mike, making it so no one survives that encounter. If Clementine chooses not to shoot, Kenny will not shoot either, making it so Mike, Arvo, and determinately Bonnie all escape, similar to canon. Clementine will then go check on Duck before the screen fades to black, and Clementine will have her flashback sequence with Lee. After this flashback, Clementine will wake up in the back of the truck after falling asleep. She will look over at Duck laying next to her and ask if he's alright. Kenny will say he hopes so as he continues driving. Jane will antagonize Kenny here, saying it's all his fault that Duck got shot, and that this will be what happens to AJ if he doesn't fix himself. This causes Kenny to become angry, stating that he would do anything to keep Duck alive, and he means anything. Kenny will swerve the vehicle to avoid hitting the car pile up, and Duck will wake up. Kenny will tell Duck everything is fine before getting out to look for fuel. Jane will tell the kids that they should just all leave, but Duck will obviously say hell no and get out of the truck and go with Kenny. Clementine will start to yell at Jane before they hear gunshots in the distance. Clementine will try to drive and still crash the car and eventually ends up at the rest stop after walking through the snowstorm and being separated from Jane. At the rest stop, she will run into Kenny and Duck already there. Kenny will say he heard what Jane said and plans to leave her behind, and this is when they notice Jane walking up to the rest stop, but without AJ. Jane will state that she lost AJ, prompting Kenny and Duck to walk outside for a second to look for him. Jane will pull Clem aside and ask her to stay out of the conflict and ask her to try and keep Duck out of it as much as she can. Kenny will then start to fight her and the fight will happen similar to the actual game, where the player can choose to intervene or not, but now you can also choose to hold Duck back sometimes or not in some scenarios. This all culminates in Kenny killing Jane, not giving the player the choice to save Jane as Clementine does not have access to a gun in this scenario. Duck will have Clementine's gun in this scenario, and he will then pull a gun on his father, with Kenny realizing what he has done. He will then apologize relentlessly. Duck will look at Clementine crying, wanting her advice. If Clementine decides to stay silent, Duck will make the decision based on the player's action in Season 1 and 2. Similar to how in Season 1, Clementine will make her decision on shooting Lee or leaving him based on the game's decision. If Duck does shoot Kenny, Kenny will have a similar reaction as in the actual game, stating he understands the reasoning behind it, and he tells Duck he is a great man and not to turn into his father before passing away. Kenny will also look at Clementine and say, "You were the daughter I never had." After this, Duck and Clem will then hear AJ crying in a car and go find him. This will trigger the game's canon alone ending, but with Duck also being here now. Now some of you might be upset that Jane is not alive no matter what, and to you is say, womp womp. This is a video about Kenny's son. Do you really think I'm going to let Jane live? It doesn't even matter anyway, because even if Jane did live, she still got pregnant by Luke and just decides to kill herself and abandon 2 kids, but in this scenario it's 3 kids, so she's even worse. If Duck does not choose to shoot Kenny, Duck and Clem will then hear AJ in a car. Kenny will see AJ alive and explain that if he knew he was alive, he wouldn't even have killed her. Duck says he knows and looks down at the ground astounded. In this scenario, the 4 now make their way to Wellington before being told at the gate that they don't have room for anybody new. Kenny will do his speech that he would do anything just for them to accept the kids, but in this scenario, Edith will still say no, stating that they just don't have room for 3 more people. She does give them extra supplies to survive. And that marks the end of the game. One thing you can yell at me for is I kind of cut out half the endings, and I just did that because I think with Duck here, some of the endings just wouldn't happen. I don't think Kenny would really willingly leave Duck behind. I mean, I know he loves Clementine too, but Duck is his, real son. I also just don't really see a scenario where Duck gets along with Jane after not already liking Jane, and then just living with Jane at house. So in this scenario, Jane just kind of has to die. So our 2 canon endings are you can either get the alone ending, or you can go with Kenny. Those are our 2 options, so take them or leave them. Again, none of this even really matters, because guess what they do in Season 3? They say, your choice doesn't matter, they just kill everyone. I'm only going to cover the parts that Clementine and Duck are actually in, so I'm not going to be talking about Javier whenever it doesn't really matter as much. So on note of that, we're going to start here. Clementine will hold Javier at gunpoint after crashing his vehicle. Duck will then tell Clementine that he thinks they just ruined another ride, to which Clementine will tell him to quiet down. Javier will realize Duck and Clementine are just kids and tell them he just wants to get back to his family. Clem and Duck will agree because Duck loves family because he's Kenny's son, and they'll help in exchange for the van. The group will then get detoured by the herd to Prescott, and Trip will welcome Clem and Duck back because they had already been there in this scenario. Clem and Duck will then go to confront Eli, the town's arms dealer that we see in-game, about getting shoddy bullets. In this scenario, Duck will be the one yelling at the arms dealer, showing similar behavior to Season 2 Kenny's erratic behavior. While Clementine will show off more of Jane's behavior in Season 2, because in the Season 3 she kind of does that anyway. Duck will eventually accidentally shoot Eli, and Clementine will ask Duck what he just did, and Duck will say, "It was an accident, Clem." Javier can then either cover for them or tell the truth, to which they will be locked in the infirmary or free to roam around. If they get locked in the infirmary with Javier, Duck and Clem will have some dialogue with each other, with Duck saying this reminds him of Hal's getting locked up. Either way, Javier gets the choice to go with Trip or Eleanor to the junkyard, and then it goes to a Clem and Duck flashback. If Clementine and Duck went alone at the end of Season 2, Clem will be by the car with AJ while Duck is out hunting for food. Eventually some walkers will near, and Clementine will put AJ inside of the car, but not before accidentally slamming her finger inside of the car door while closing it. With her free hand, she will have to do some quick time event to kill some walkers before Duck suddenly runs out of the woods to help. He'll open the car door and Clem's finger will be bent the wrong way, but the flashback will end and it's revealed that Clementine lost her ring finger. If Clementine and Duck went with Kenny at the end of Season 2, Kenny will still be teaching Clementine how to drive with Duck and AJ in the back. There will be a dialogue that indicated that he already had been teaching Duck earlier and now it's Clementine's turn. It will be revealed they're heading to Florida, and Duck will make a comment asking if they could return back to their home, because that's actually where Kenny and Duck lived before the apocalypse. Kenny will say he's unsure, but he hopes they could at least make a stop there. Suddenly, Clem will lose control of the vehicle and Kenny will fly out of the windshield. Clementine runs over and checks on him shortly before being joined by Duck and AJ. Kenny will insist you have to leave him as he has been paralyzed, and Duck will obviously be upset at this. Clementine will have the choice to convince Duck to leave or try to help Kenny. If she convinces Duck to leave, Kenny will thank her and tell Duck he loves him and tell Clementine she's the daughter that he never had before sacrificing himself. If she tries to help Kenny, then they'll try to pick Kenny up by his arms and legs before Kenny yells and finally Duck realizes they have to leave. He still tells Duck that he loves him and tells Clementine she's the daughter he never had and then dies. Eventually, Clem, Duck, Javi, and Eleanor/Trip will make it to the junkyard where it's revealed that the herd ran through it. Whenever Mariana comes out, Duck will then turn to Clementine and make a reference to Sarah, saying she looks more capable than Sarah. They later find Kate and Gabe and they all get reunited shortly before getting ambushed and Mariana gets killed and Kate gets shot. Javi can then choose to stay at the junkyard or go back with his family. Clementine will want Javier to stay, but Duck will insist Javier goes back with his family. If Javier decides to go back, Clem and Duck will cover them as they leave. If Javier decides to stay, he will pick up the grenade and throw it as in canon. That marks the end of episode 1. There's not too many deviations, but there probably won't be that many in general, because you're not making the decisions in this game, Javier is, not Duck or anything. If Javier decides to go back with his family, everything will happen the same except both Clementine and Duck will show back up at Prescott before the fight. If Javier decides to stay with Clem and Duck, he will wake up and ask them what happened. Clementine and Duck will explain who the new Frontier are, but they will both be kind of shady about it, but showing that they have hatred towards them. Clementine will say that they helped dig a grave for Mariana. As Javier buries Mariana, Duck will state he's sorry that he never got to bury his father, as either scenario that Kenny dies, he never got buried. They then all decide to go to Prescott. The new Frontier will show up at Prescott, and Duck and Clementine will say Javi shouldn't have to surrender to the new Frontier, but either way a shootout will happen. Duck will escape with Clementine during the fight. On the road, the group will stop and Conrad will blame Javier for his wife's death, and Gabe will pull a gun on him. Duck will then pull a gun on Gabe, showing off more of Kenny's erratic behavior in Season 2. He'll then say, "Listen, Vanilla Ice, I don't know what the fuck your problem is, but you better put your gun down." Gabe will then shoot the gun at the ground as in canon. Clementine will then go over to check on Gabe, to which Duck will just watch with his arms crossed. The group will get stopped by blockage while Kate and Eleanor go ahead past the cars. The group will then go up to higher ground and then find Jesus watching them. While figuring out what to do with Jesus, Duck will be on the side of tying him up. Jesus will then say his friends call him Jesus, to which Duck will then make a remark about his father being a Christian man. They will all then make their way to Richmond together through a train tunnel after learning that it's run by the new Frontier. There will then be a flashback to Clementine, Duck, and AJ getting stuck inside of the shed being surrounded by walkers. Duck will begin comforting AJ while Clem watches the door. Suddenly, Ava will show up to the door, at which Duck will shout at her to go away. Clementine can then tell Duck to be quiet, or if she doesn't, Ava will. Ava will eventually make her way inside, and Duck will start to hold her at gunpoint. Clementine can either agree with Duck and he'll keep his gun on her, or disagree, to which Duck will bring up Arvo saying she can't be trusted but will put the gun down anyway. Ava will bring up that they seem too young to be the parents, to which Duck will state that all of their parents are dead. Ava will then invite them to join the new Frontier. If you went with the alone ending, Duck will state that it's just another ghost like Wellington, as they don't know if Wellington really exists in this ending. If you went with Kenny, Duck will state it's just another hopeless dream like Wellington, referencing that they weren't allowed in at Wellington. The flashback then ends and Clementine will tell Javier about her, and Duck saying that they used to be in the new Frontier. Duck will stay silent about this, but be mad that Clementine told their secret. Eventually, the group will then get through the tunnel where Conrad will grab Clementine instead of Gabe and say they need to trade her and Duck to the new frontier. Duck, Gabe, and Javi will all have their guns up, and Javi can have the option to start to agree or disagree, but Duck will then shoot Conrad, taking the choice away from the player here. Instead, Javier now has the option to grab Duck after this and go through with Conrad's plan or agree with Duck's choice and they move on. If Javier grabs Duck, Clementine will pull her gun, but Gabe will stand in front of Javi, making Clementine put her gun down. Duck will make a remark about Javi, saying he's a piece of shit, but Clementine will just stay silent. Javier will bring the two up as hostages, and Trip and Jesus will be shocked that Duck killed Conrad. If Javier agreed with Duck's choice, Duck and Clementine will break off with the group for a bit, but Duck will say they'll meet again as Javier just earned his respect. Javier will then go up and explain to Trip and Jesus that Conrad went crazy and Duck killed him, and Duck and Clementine went their own way. If Clementine and Duck are still with the group, when they make their way to the gate, Max will be surprised to see them both and refer to them as Bonnie and Clyde. And that marks the end of episode 2. Again, I know not a lot of it is changing, but still. I do think it's an interesting dynamic to have Duck start to become more erratic like Kenny, and then Clementine become kind of more clear-headed, but like kind of not even selfish, but just more like Jane in some ways. Anyway, the group will then make it inside, and if Duck and Clementine are still here while they're inside, then Duck will act similar to how Kenny acted during Season 2, Episode 3, trying to get out of the truck. Clementine will attempt to calm him down, saying that he knows there is no way out right now, but Duck will just state that no one is helping him and there is a way. Javier can either tell him to stop, to which Duck will get angry with Javier and go stand near the window. Alternatively, Javier can say he's right, to which Duck will be delighted, but shortly afterward David will come in and take Javier anyway. Javier will then get separated from the group and we won't see Duck and Clementine until everyone gets kicked out of Richmond if they are in Richmond. If Duck and Clementine were in Richmond, they will take the two of the guns out of the supplies given to them. If Duck and Clementine were not taken into Richmond, they will reunite with Javier in the woods, saving the walker on top of him. Javier, Duck, and Clementine will then talk about David, with Clementine and Duck stating that David is a monster. They all will rejoin with Trip in the forest before going into a flashback for Clementine and Duck. It is revealed that Clementine and Duck join the new frontier regardless of your choice, which is still stupid, but I'm not going to change it here, and that AJ is sick. Duck will be sitting alone by a tent moping in his sorrow, similar to Kenny at the power station in Season 2, Episode 5. This will still give Clementine the sole choice to inject AJ or not inject him with the medicine that may or may not work. If Clementine chooses to inject AJ, Duck will surround Clementine along with the rest of the group, but once he sees what she did, he will smile. If not, then she'll drop the medicine and he'll show up and surround him anyway. David will decide to expel her, to which Duck will say if she's leaving, I'm leaving, and David will just smile and say sure. David will then force AJ out of Clementine's hands, to which Clementine will have her reaction of yelling. Duck will start freaking out, similar to Season 1, Episode 4 Kenny, when Ben told him that he got Katja killed. Duck will start shouting things like, "You fucking pissant! You're dead! Dead! You hear me?" This will cause David to not allow Duck to say goodbye, but Clementine can still have the goodbye depending on if she spat or not. Once this flashback ends, Clementine will go on a rant about how almost everyone she is ever in a group with dies, and almost asks if they should be in groups anymore. This is showing her behavior like Jane, because that is a very Jane thing to say. Duck, on the other hand, will start to show a favorable light on the group they are in right now with Trip and Javier, showing that it's nice to have a group of people you can trust. The group will then make their way to the warehouse and get inside. Once inside, David will show up and Clementine will fire a shot at the door, stating not to let him in. Duck will agree with Clementine and point a gun at Jesus, creating tension within the group. Javier can convince Duck to put his gun away, but if he fails, Trip will convince him instead and Duck will put his gun away no matter what. Clementine will then put her gun away too, knowing she's alone. David will come inside and Clem and Duck will confront him about AJ, where David will reveal that AJ actually survived his sickness. Clementine will be skeptical, but Duck will believe David instantly, stating, "I knew it! That boy was stronger than a box of nails." David will say Lingard took the boy somewhere, and Clementine and Duck still want to leave, but can't yet due to the herd. Trip will find the boxes of supplies stolen from Prescott in multiple communities, and David will say he had nothing to do with it. Duck will immediately lash out at David, as Duck has had a history of disliking thieves, as Ben got his mom killed by stealing, and their last group got destroyed by some stolen medicine, aka Arvo. Before Duck gets too far, they hear some distant voices that turn out to be Max, Badger, and Lonnie. They will all split up, with Duck and Clementine going with Jesus after Lonnie. After everything inside happens, they will all regroup, with Jesus stating that Lonnie got away. If Javier just bashed in Badger's skull with the baseball bat, and Clementine and Duck watched Kenny smash Carver's skull in with the crowbar, Clementine will look away from Javier slightly horrified. Duck, on the other hand, will just nod at Javier, understanding his actions. Everyone will then go to Richmond. Once in Richmond, Clementine and Duck will go their own ways, stating they need to find out more information about AJ. And that marks the end of episode 3. In this episode, there was a little bit of tension in the group there. Other than that, not much changed. Javier will then find Clementine and Duck in Lingard's office. Clementine will be looking around for period products while Duck is standing by Lingard waiting for him to wake up. Clementine will ask Javier about her period, to which Duck will ask what a period is, leading to the whole conversation being more awkward than it already was. Depending on who stitched up Clementine in Season 2, Episode 1, whoever did it will be stitching up Javier. If Lee cut his arm off in Season 1 and Duck watched, he will start to tell the story of Lee cutting off his arm while stitching up Javier. Javier will be like, "What?" And Duck will say something like, "Oh, bad timing?" If that did not happen, Duck will just tell Javier a little bit about his father Kenny. All of this will lead into the flashbacks. If they went with Kenny, Duck and Clem will be sitting around a fire with AJ while Clementine does some shadow puppets. Kenny will walk up and sit by Duck and tell Duck he always used to do shadow puppets for him when he was little, to which Duck will say he remembers that. Duck and Clementine start to help Kenny start a fire, but then a walker comes to hurt AJ. Duck and Clementine will take care of it and Kenny will be proud of them. Kenny will still go into his speech about Clementine being the only mama he's got. He'll then turn to Duck and say, "If anything happens to me, I'm sure he'd be happy to have a papa like you too." Duck and Clementine will look at each other, thinking Kenny is implying that they like each other, and Kenny will go like, "No, not like that, guys." Kenny will then talk about trying to go to Florida and Duck will instantly agree with his plan. Kenny will then go into his monologue about Sarita and say family is what you make it, and the flashback will end. If you go alone in Season 2, there actually isn't a flashback, which is stupid. I don't know why they didn't. There will then be another flashback about Clementine and Duck meeting with Ava after getting kicked out of the New Frontier. Duck will be comforting Clementine about AJ, and this will also show that Duck is still thinking about trying to go steal AJ back. Ava will then show up and Duck will tell her to give AJ back, with Clementine either backing him up or telling him to calm down, to which he will do either one. Either way, Ava will say that's not gonna happen and hand them a bag of supplies. Clementine will pick up the drawing AJ drew and Duck will look at it. Duck will then bring up how they used to color all the time back at the motel and he's glad that AJ's drawing too. Duck will then bring up the drawing that Clementine drew of Duck's family, and Duck will become somber and thank her for that, and that it's all he had of his family for a while. Ava will then tell them about Prescott and the flashback will end. Duck and Clementine will finish stitching up Javier's arm and Lingard will wake up. Lingard will say he'll tell them where AJ is if they agree to kill him, to which Duck will say yes, not letting the player make the choice anymore. Lingard will tell them that AJ is at McCarroll Ranch and then die. Clementine and Duck will then join up with the group again, and they both agree with the plan to get the truck to escape after stopping Joan. Duck will then help them go find the truck, and Clementine will again have a moment with Gabe, with Duck looking at them with his arms crossed again. Whenever Javier needs help hot wiring the truck, the player can choose to do it, or if the player refuses, Duck will do it instead, stating that Kenny taught him when he was younger. They then get the truck out of there and will be sitting in the truck waiting for the signal to go into town. Duck will be in the back of the truck playing euchre with Clementine and Gabe. Clementine and Gabe will appear to be getting closer, to which Duck will get more and more tense whenever they do. Kate will confess her love to Javier before the group heads into the town because David is getting hung. In the town square, Ava or Tripp will be killed and David will be hung but escape, with either Clint or Joan getting away with the other dying. A gunfight will break out here and Duck will help the group fight, but nothing much changes. Kate will eventually show up and crash the truck. And that will mark the end of episode 4. In this episode, we had a little bit more tension of Gabe and Duck being like rivals for Clementine's love or whatever. We'll talk about that more later. Duck and Clementine will go inside with everybody after they find Kate and after the chaos to figure out what to do. David will break Fern's arm, Rufus's wife, and Duck will stand in front of Clementine instinctually, showing that he cares about her safety. David will go on the roof and everyone will eventually follow, and they jump rooftop to rooftop until they find the helicopter. Whoever you saved last episode, Tripp/Ava, will now die at this helicopter like the actual game, but will still be the only deaths because plot armor for everyone else. They will then make their way to the vehicle in the garage where David will fight Javier and then run off with Gabe while Kate leaves to save Richmond. Now, you have 3 people to help with your plans, because you have Javier, Clementine, and Duck. Similar to how Clementine will only help you if you killed Conrad in the tunnels, Duck will only help you if you chose to kill Ava and save Trip in the execution, even though Trip technically lives longer if you pick that option. If Duck will not help you, he will go with Kate. So now I'm going to list off the 8 endings, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, I'm just going to explain who lives and who dies in each ending. In ending 1, Javier, Clementine, and Duck go after Gabe and David together. David and Gabe will survive and Kate will die. In ending 2, Javier and Clementine go after Gabe and David, and Duck will go with Kate. Gabe, David, and Kate, all 3 survive. Ending 3, Javier and Duck go after Gabe and David, Clementine will go with Kate. David and Kate will live, Gabe will die. Ending 4, Javier goes after Gabe and David, Duck and Clementine goes with Kate. David will die, but Gabe and Kate will live. Ending 5, Javier, Clementine, and Duck go with Kate, Kate lives, Gabe and David die. Ending 6, Javier and Clementine go with Kate, Duck goes after David and Gabe. Kate and David live and Gabe will die. Ending 7, Javier and Duck will go with Kate, Clementine goes after David and Gabe, Kate and Gabe will live, David will die. Ending 8, Javier goes with Kate and Clementine and Duck will go after Gabe and David. Kate, Gabe, and David will all live. All of these endings can happen in game except for 2 of them where all 3 people live. In these endings, if Javier convinces David to come back, David will behave similarly in the actual game where he refuses to talk to Javier, Gabe, and now Kate in this scenario. Whenever Javier has her talk with Clementine at the end, Duck will actually give Clementine the haircut instead, saving Clementine from whatever haircut that is. Javier, please never touch scissors again. If in Season 2 you went with Kenny, he will say Kenny taught him how to cut hair. If you went alone in Season 2, he will say that someone in the New Frontier taught him how to cut hair. If Gabe is alive, Clementine and Gabe will go talk together while Duck has a conversation with Javier. Javier will bring up Clem and Gabe and ask Duck if he's jealous. Duck will look shocked and say that he only sees Clementine as a sister, showing he's really not that upset about the situation. Javier will bring up the scenarios where Duck got defensive and crossed his arms, to which Duck will reveal he was actually just trying to figure out if Gabe was a good person for Clementine or not, and he was not really that jealous. Javier will then tell them goodbye, and Clementine and Duck will then leave Richmond on their search to go find AJ. And that marks the end of Season 3. Episode 1, Done Running. Duck is driving the car while Clementine sits in the passenger seat and AJ sits in the back. AJ is in the back playing with a revolver, and if Duck got gun trained by Lee in Season 1, then he will echo whatever advice Lee chose to give them. Whenever Clem hands AJ something in the back seat for the first time, if they were with Kenny when he died in a car crash in Season 3, he will ask Clementine to put her seatbelt back on. They will all then stop at the train station. They all 3 get through the walkers and get to the door. Whenever Clementine reminds AJ of the rules of survival, Duck will also reiterate them. They get inside and see the couple who poison themselves, and Duck asks to take a second and goes to stand by himself in a corner. Eventually, Clem will have to choose to send AJ through the gap or kill the couple. If Duck got to say goodbye to his mom in Season 1, he will suggest killing the couple, but if he did not get to say goodbye, he will suggest sending AJ through. Either way, Clementine gets to pick. They go through the door and find the food in the trap door, and the trap goes off. Duck will die for AJ as Clem slams the door shut. They all are unscathed, but the herd of walkers still come for them and they fight their way back to the car, and then the car crashes. Whenever Clem temporarily regains consciousness, she will hear/see Duck talking to the group of kids about them being injured, and then she passes back out. Clementine wakes up on the bed but is unhandcuffed this time, Duck sitting on the chair nearby. He tells her to be careful and explains they're in a settlement ran by kids and they all seem nice enough, but to be cautious. If they were with Kenny when he died in a car crash, Duck will darkingly joke at least they wore their seatbelts. 10 will walk into the room and will talk to them about AJ for a little bit, saying he seems nice. Marlon will walk in shortly after and invite them on the tour. Marlon will try to explain the situation, to which Duck will interrupt and say he already explained some, and Marlon will just shrug him off and explain it again anyway. Marlon will get called off to go help with the problem and tell them to go find Lewis. Whenever they walk into the building, Ruby will be storming off because she got bit by AJ. Duck will explain to Clem that she seems to be their medic for the most part, so they should probably go find AJ and talk to him about it. They find AJ with Lewis and they will talk to AJ about him biting before Lewis introduces himself. Lewis will ask if they are a couple, to which Clem will have the option to completely shut it down or entertain it, making Duck quiet if she entertains it. Lewis will ask Duck about his name, making some joke about it. If Duck shot Kenny in Season 2, he will tell Lewis to shut up and be short about talking about his name. If he did not shoot Kenny in Season 2, then he will laugh at Lewis' joke and tell him his real name is Ken Jr. They will give AJ his revolver back, to which Lewis will be skeptical, but Duck will reassure him if Clem doesn't. Lewis will play Clementine the Clementine song, and Duck will laugh, encouraging him if Clem doesn't. Marlon will come back and ask them to help deal with the walkers. They'll walk out and meet the group, Violet making a sarcastic comment, to which Duck will get defensive, to which Clem can back him up or be more forgiving. Lewis will show them his weapon Cheryl's. If Duck got watched by Chuck in Season 1, he will bring up the fact they knew a Charles once a long time ago. AJ will then ask if he can come with them to fight the walkers. If Duck and Clem got to go to Crawford in Season 1, the player will now unlock the choice to let AJ come help deal with the walkers, but it's still up to Clem. If he is allowed to go, it won't change that much, but the fight will be slightly easier with AJ killing one of the walkers for you. Once the fight is over, Duck will kind of hang out by himself, letting the player interact with other characters. Clem will try and help a sim, but get grabbed by a walker. Rosie will kill the walker before growling at Clem. Duck runs in front of Clem, trying to protect her, but it turns out Rosie is friendly. Duck will chew Marlon out and say to get her under control. A sim will go off on how they need to expand the safe zone, but get shut down by Marlon. They make it back to the courtyard and get reunited with AJ if he did not come with them. Marlon will sneak up on AJ and get elbowed in his balls. Duck laughs and runs off to talk to AJ, and Clem apologizes to Marlon for AJ. Clem will go over and encourage AJ to say sorry, and Duck agrees he should. They go over to Violet and 10 by Sophie and Minnie's graves. AJ asks if they should pay respects, and if Duck didn't get to say goodbye to his mom, he will make him no matter what. Or if he got to say goodbye, Clem will decide. AJ apologizes to Marlon, and it's dinner time. Lewis will burp, causing AJ to burp louder, and Duck laughs, but once Ruby gets up and storms off, he will apologize to Ruby, and she'll leave anyway. AJ will want more soup, and Lewis will offer his, but Duck will refuse and give AJ his instead. Lewis then announces the card game. Violet will ask where AJ's parents are, and if Clem doesn't answer, then Duck will. Lewis will ask if Clem's had a boyfriend, to which everyone will say of course isn't that what Duck is. Clem has the choice again to shut it down or encourage it, causing Duck to be quiet again if she encourages. If Clem brings up Gabe, Duck will laugh and say he never was good enough for her. Marlon will ask who watched them, to which Clem can answer whoever, but Duck will bring up Krista and Kenny specifically. Violet will ask who they think will die first. Clem can choose whoever, but Duck will choose Marlon, saying it's because of his haircut. Lewis will then ask if they've killed anyone they've ever loved, and Clem's answer is still player dependent. Duck will choose Kenny if he shot him in Season 2. If he did not kill Kenny in Season 2, he will bring up Sarita if he chopped her arm off. If he did not do any of those, then he will just have a basic answer. The card game will end and they'll head back to the room with AJ. AJ will be drawing when Violet comes in asking for the crayons. Duck will encourage AJ to share them but won't argue either way. Violet will then talk about Minnie and Sophie and bring up her insecurities. If Clem says she likes Violet, Duck will smugly smile. AJ will finish drawing and they will all start to go to bed, but AJ will lie underneath the bed. Duck does not allow it though and takes away the player's choice, making him sleep on the bed. In the morning, they head to Marlon's office to talk to him about staying. AJ will take 10's toy and Duck will encourage him to give it back, but it's still up to Clem. Suddenly, Rosie bursts into the room and Duck stands in front of Clem again like the last time. Marlon walks in and calls her off. If Clem decides to pet the dog, Duck will too, commenting on his old pet dog Franklin. Marlon shows them the map of the safe zone, to which Duck will point out that it seems to be getting smaller, to which Marlon admits, but he says it's necessary. Marlon asks them for help, to which they agree and can go fishing with Brody and Violet or go hunting with a Sim and Lewis. If they go with the Sim and Lewis to hunt, they will run into the walker hanging upside down. If Clem decides to do the piñata with the zombie, Duck will be disappointed, saying that it's rude and a waste of time. They will then go to find Brody and Violet. They find the fishing cabin robbed and Brody goes back to tell Marlon. If they go with Brody and Violet, Duck will suggest going to Florida as part of the road trip. Duck will notice the obvious tension and be blunt about it, bringing it up in front of everyone, but both Brody and Violet will shut it down. Because of this, Brody and Violet will seek Clem's help only, resolving the issue. Afterwards, they will go try and find a Sim and Lewis and find a trap triggered with a Bible cigarette near it. Brody freaks out but calms down and goes with a Sim back to tell Marlon. Either way, the group will decide to go to the train station with Duck agreeing, saying the safe zone is a stupid rule. Once they get there, they will have the idea to use the bell to distract the herd. Duck will be the one to suggest Lewis to be the distraction.
If questioned about it, Duck will just say he has a big mouth. They get past the herd, Duck, Clem, and AJ going inside while Violet keeps watch outside. They find the surviving food before Abel walks into the office and draws his gun on the two. Abel will engage in some talk between the two before he notices AJ drawing his gun on him. When Abel aims his gun at AJ, Duck immediately tells him to stop or he'll regret it, and Abel will laugh, calling him tough. Taking away the player's choice, Duck will push Abel out the window. He will state afterward that you can't make deals with bandits, implying he has trauma with Ben getting his mom killed. They grab their duffel bags and leave the train station. They make it back to the school and find Brody telling Marlon about the person messing with the traps. Clem and Duck will show the supplies they got, Brody being skeptical about them going outside of the safe zone. Violet will then disclose they encountered Abel. Brody will start to freak out and say that he could have followed them back to the school. Duck will shut it down, saying there's no way. Brody will eventually escalate it and shove Marlon on the ground and chew Duck out. Duck will make a smartass remark back, but Brody storms off. Marlon will reluctantly thank Clem and Duck for bringing back so much food, even though he's unhappy they went outside of the safe zone. Violet will suggest Brody could just be wary after how 10 sisters died outside of the safe zone, Duck getting silent about the topic. Lewis, Sim, and Violet will eventually go off and do their own thing, leaving Clem, Duck, AJ, and Ten outside. Ten suggests everyone seems sad because it's been almost a year since his sister's disappearance. Duck seeming sad for him too. Ten brushes it off and says he doesn't find death scary. Ten shows them his drawing of him, his sisters, and the walkers who killed them. AJ asks to be in Ten's drawing, Ten asking if Clem and Duck want to be in the picture. Clem can choose whatever she would like, but Duck will agree either way. If Clementine declines, Duck will allow AJ to be in the drawing. They leave Ten and go back to their room. AJ says that he likes the school, and Duck will tell him not to get comfortable. If Kenny survived in Season 2, Duck will ask Clem if she remembers Wellington and how it turned out to be not so accepting. If not, AJ will bring up the McCarroll Ranch. Later in the night, Clem wakes up to shouting and looks over to see Duck already awake peeking through the door. They agree to leave AJ in the room and leave to investigate. They eventually find the cellar door and go inside to find Brody and Marlon fighting. Brody will be talking about needing to confess, to which Duck will break the silence and ask them about what. Marlon brushes them off, but Brody spills that they know Abel. She'll then reveal that they traded 10 sisters to let the kids live. Duck will turn to Marlon angry, but before he can do anything, Marlon will hit Brody on the head with a flashlight. Before Marlon can check on Brody, Duck will tackle him and start to fight, showing his impulsive side from Kenny is still here, especially with the mention of bandits again. While Duck is fighting Marlon, Brody will warn Clementine about Marlon before passing away. Suddenly, Marlon will knee Duck in the ribs and escape, locking them in the cellar. Clementine will look for a way out and find the ruler before getting pulled down the stairs by Brody's corpse. Duck will pull her off before picking up the flashlight. He will kill her quickly before huffing and walking off. Duck and Clem will make it out and see AJ holding Marlon at gunpoint, asking where they are, with the rest of the school watching. Marlon accuses Duck of killing Brody, saying Clementine is just vouching for him. Marlon will eventually steal AJ's gun and aim it at Duck, but Clem says if he kills him, they won't be able to trade them to the Raiders. Clementine will then tell the group about Marlon trading the kids. Marlon will be winning the argument and Clem to appeal either Lewis or Violet. Whoever she appeals to, she will have to appeal extra hard to account for Duck. Eventually the kids will turn on Marlon, and Marlon will admit that he did it. Once Marlon falters, Duck will tackle Marlon. Once Marlon gets back up, suddenly AJ will shoot Marlon in the head. Episode 2, Suffer the Children. Clementine wakes up and sees AJ making coffee for her, and Duck pacing back and forth in the room. AJ will ask if Lewis was right to label him a murderer, and it will flash back to when AJ shot Marlon. It shows the group of kids distraught and Lewis calling AJ a murderer. Clem can answer whatever she would like. If Duck killed Kenny in Season 2, he will say that he was a murderer and will sit down on the bed saying he learned it from him, feeling regret. If Duck didn't kill Kenny in Season 2, he will say he's not a murderer and that he was justified. In another flashback, Ruby and Mitch are approaching her, and before Duck can step in front, Violet steps in front of Clementine. Violet tells Duck, Clem, and AJ to go inside so the group can discuss. In the present, AJ will ask about how the others will see him, and Clem and Duck will convince him that they will try to atone for what he did. In another flashback, Mitch draws a knife on Duck, Clem, and AJ while walking back to their room. Duck will immediately disarm Mitch without a second thought and without saying a word, just walking past him. In the present, AJ will bring up how Clem has killed people before, like Lee. After that conversation, AJ will also ask Duck about Kenny if he killed Kenny. Duck will explain himself, saying his father was a threat at the time, solemnly. Ten walks in and asks the group to come to Marlon and Brody's funeral at Violet's request. Once the group gets there, Mitch will be mad and AJ will step up to talk in front of the group, repeating whatever had been discussed in their room, causing Lewis to leave in frustration. Mitch puts it to a vote to exile AJ, Clem, and Duck, and Violet sends them inside again to wait for their decision. Violet and Lewis walk in shortly after and tell them it's time to leave. Lewis will ask AJ for his gun, and Duck will step in front of AJ saying no way in hell are they giving up the gun if they have to leave, taking away the player's choice. The group will be walking in the woods near the edge of the safe zone, AJ asking about what they'll do now, Duck seeming determined that they'll figure it out like always. Lewis will agree with Duck's point, saying they're returning to a way of life they're used to and Duck will bite his tongue, but clear he's unhappy he chimed in. They reach the edge and Violet seems sad they have to leave, but reluctantly they agree to part without arguing further. The three will now roam the forest before a gunshot rings out on a nearby tree, causing the three to duck. Get it? Behind a tree. They see that it's Abel, and because Duck pushed him out the window, he will be the one to go out and disarm him, but eventually get overpowered by Abel and forced to the ground. A woman then walks up behind Clem and AJ and holds a gun to their head. The group asks for Marlon's whereabouts, but after being told he died, they're dismissive and just ask to be taken to the school, but Duck and Clem refuse, prompting Duck to be flipped over, and it turns out the woman is Lily, who recognizes Clem and Duck. Lily will tell Abel to lighten up and invite Clem and Duck to stand up and talk. Lily will notice Lee's absence and talk to Clem about it. She will then turn to Duck and ask about Katja and Kenny. She will be nice about Katja and be slightly saddened. She will say Kenny got what was coming to him though. If Duck is the one who killed Kenny in Season 2, he will just get quiet but not agree necessarily. If Duck didn't kill Kenny in Season 2, he will physically lunge towards Lily before Abel holds a gun against his neck, causing him to back off. Lily will invite the three to join the Delta and convince the kids to join too. If Duck killed Kenny in Season 2, he will hesitate but then tell her to fuck off. If not, he will just tell her to fuck off. Clem looks over and sees Lewis and Violet sneaking up and can tell them to run or shoot an arrow. Either way, it's enough of a distraction for Clem, Duck, and AJ to make a run for it. AJ gets shot in the abdomen and Duck looks like he's about to go back and run towards Lily and Abel, but Clem convinces him to run, so Duck picks AJ up and runs. Eventually, Lily and Abel get cornered away by walkers. A walker comes up and grabs Clem, and Duck is about to stab it before it speaks and stuns them. He tells them to follow them, and without much other choice, they agree. They make it back to his camp and he tells Clementine to remove the shot from AJ's stomach as he and Duck hold AJ still. After they get all of the pieces out, he reveals his name is James, saying he wears his mask because of a group named the Whisperers. Duck seems visibly disgusted by it but doesn't say anything. They all talk before a walker comes near the group and James tells them to lure it away. Duck says that's stupid and to just kill it, but Clem can make the choice. James offers some food either way afterward, and Duck will refuse, saying he doesn't trust him. The next morning, James leads them all the way back to the school. Willie will shoot an arrow by James' foot, causing him to leave, Duck muttering, "Fucking hippie." Lewis comes out and lets them back in. Ruby begins working on AJ, Duck pacing back and forth as he waits for her to keep working. Violet asks to see Clementine in his office, and Duck says he'll stay with AJ. They discuss helping out with the school and letting her stay before they hear a scuffle in the hallway. They walk out and Duck is fighting Mitch. Mitch is yelling about how he's helping the Raiders and Duck is visibly getting more pissed being compared to the Raiders. Eventually, Clem separates them and Violet orders Duck and Mitch to go to the greenhouse to clear it out. Ruby offers to go with to help keep the peace, and then Clementine insists on going, not wanting to be separated from Duck. They all arrive and find it locked, Clem finding an entrance on the side. Clem can offer to go through it, or if she declines, then Duck will be the one to go through. If Duck goes through, it essentially just makes the gameplay slightly easier for you because you don't have to do that section. They search for barbed wire in the warehouse, and Clem finds a crowbar to open a locked cabinet with the barbed wire inside. Whenever Clem is done with it, Duck asks to see the crowbar. He lifts it up and inspects it before nodding and keeping it. Mitch asks to search further to find stuff to make a bomb. Inside of the room, the former nurse, Miss Martin, grabs Clementine, and Duck hits the walker in the head with the crowbar, killing it. Ruby gets upset, saying Miss Martin was always one of the good teachers. Mitch finds his bomb stuff. Ruby suggests burying Miss Martin while Mitch wants to burn her. If Clementine suggests to burn it, Duck will be upset at her, saying it's nice to have a closure with a burial, hinting back to his mom with Season 1. If Clementine buries it, Duck will agree and will help bury the body. If Clementine stays silent, Duck will be upset at her, but tell Ruby he'll help bury her. Later, Duck will be checking on AJ with Clementine, Duck checking his forehead. Lewis will inform them that the others agreed for them to stay, at least to help fight the Raiders. Duck will scoff at this, saying they're all just scared and need their help, but he'll look back down at AJ and bite his tongue from saying anything else. AJ will wake up and ask Lewis if they're still friends, leaving Lewis speechless. AJ says he's not mad at Lewis and Duck just nods. We then cut to the time-lapse of the kids preparing for the attack, just with Duck helping out with some things too. Clementine then has her nightmare, and when she wakes up she sees AJ and Duck staring at her. AJ tells her that she's having the nightmare about the McCarroll Ranch again. AJ will then make a remark he's never going to sleep again before feeling some pain, and Duck will tell him to lay down, but he'll decline, saying he has to be stronger and wants to patrol. Duck won't allow this though and tells him to go back to sleep. AJ will ask to sleep with Clem then, and Clem agrees, Duck scoffing but smiling, secretly thinking it's cute. The next morning, the three will walk out into the courtyard to help set up the school. AJ leaves to go watch with 10, Clem and Duck glad about him stepping up. Violet and Lewis will fight, and Lewis will walk off to the practice range, leaving Violet, Clem, and Duck to talk. Violet is stressed that they just have to wait, and Duck agrees, saying they're cowards for waiting. Violet decides to go fortify a building, leaving Clementine to go check on everyone, as Duck goes to check on AJ and 10. After a bit, Clementine will then go check on Duck, AJ, and 10. 10 is asking if his sisters will be with the Raiders when they come, and Duck will uncomfortably say it's possible. Duck will follow Clementine after, clearly wanting to get away from the situation. Violet will come back and be upset that the kids need to be trying harder. Lily and Asim will argue about their trap before Lily punches Asim in the stomach either way and runs off, Asim saying he's okay and limping over to the fire pit. Lewis decides to play Truth or Dare to lower the tension. Asim ends up asking 10 about something he's never shared, and he brings up how he thinks walkers will end someday, Duck finding it touching. Violet tells everyone to go get back to work, and Lewis and Violet ask Clem for their help. If she goes with either of them, it ends about the same, but Clem now also has a third choice to go with Duck instead. If Clem goes with Duck, they will go check outside the perimeter, Duck saying whenever he got stressed from the kids during the time-lapse, he would come here. Duck will bring up people from their past like Lee, Kenny, Krista, saying that life feels like a lifetime ago, even though he knows they're really young in perspective. Clem will now have the option to bring up something about each person and talk more in depth, or just stay silent and continue. If Clem brings up Lee, Duck will smile softly and talk about the time he pretended to be Robin with Lee, or if Lee shot him down, he'll say something else. If Clem brings up Kenny, Duck will say he knows he's a lot like his dad now and sometimes worries about how it's going to affect AJ. If Clem brings up Krista, Duck will bring up how much time they spent with her after Lee passed, saying he's grateful for her and Omid. After this, Duck will turn to Clem directly, saying his biggest fear isn't walkers or even people, it's getting attached. Attached to places, people, they all go away, except for Clem. It's always just been Clem, Duck, and AJ. Clem will have 3 options. 1. Stay silent and Duck will harden slightly, saying, but luck runs out sometimes, but we'll get through this together, for AJ. Option 2. Tell Duck he's like a family, a brother to her. He'll smile at that and say she's the best family he has left and they should go check on AJ. Option 3. Tell Duck she couldn't do without him and she wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. Duck will get shy and admit he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to mess anything up. Clem will have another choice to kiss or hold hands with Duck. If Clem holds hands with Duck, they will look out into the woods together, Duck promising that they'll get through tonight. If Clem kisses Duck, Duck will get a big grin afterwards, saying it's been long enough. Suddenly, Ruby will call out for them, saying it's time for watch duty. Clementine and Duck will be on different watchtowers, but if Duck was romanced, he'll grin extra wide and wave goofily at Clem from the other tower. Clem and AJ will have their talk about killing Abel. Duck will yell their name and point in the woods, and they'll look in the woods and see a group of people. The 3 will go to warn the kids. The kids are going over the plan when suddenly a shot rings out and Omar gets shot. Some Molotovs get thrown and the gate's broken. Lily leading a group into the courtyard. Clem will aim a bow at her, Lily asking where everyone's at. Lily will taunt her and compare her negatively to Lee. Duck will get mad at this and show himself now too, Lily laughing, saying he's just like his father. Unfazed, Lily turns away and says 10's sister wanted to come say hi to everyone. Luring 10 out before much else happens, the bomb goes off. The kids start to fight before Lily stabs Mitch in the neck, the rest running into the building. Eventually, Abel follows and throws a Molotov, causing Clem, Duck, and AJ to be separated from the kids. Abel will begin to fight Duck, with Clementine jumping in and tackling Abel off the balcony, causing them both to fall. She'll come to with Abel passed out with a broken leg and Lily holding her at gunpoint, hesitating to pull the trigger. Suddenly, Duck jumps on top of Lily while Clem now deals with an awakened Abel. When Clem finally deals with him, she looks back up to see Duck getting dragged away personally by Lily. and on the other side, Lewis and Violet both in a cart together. The player now has the choice to save both Lewis and Violet, or save just Duck. If Clem saves Lewis and Violet, she'll shoot the raider guarding the cart and they'll both sneak out, but Lily and Duck will now be gone. If Clem saves Duck, she'll shoot Lily in the arm, causing her to let go of Duck long enough for him to scramble away, but Lewis and Violet will get taken in the cart. Either way, Clementine will kill the rest of the walkers and collapse exhausted on the courtyard ground. If Lewis and Violet were both saved, they'll come and announce that Omar, Asim, and Duck were the only 3 who got captured. If Duck was saved instead of Lewis and Violet, he'll announce that Omar, Asim, Lewis, and Violet were all taken. Ruby, realizing she'll have to step into a leadership role or let Clem and Duck take over. She decides to let them be in charge. In either scenario, Clementine notices Abel on the ground, and that leads to episode 3, Broken Toys. If Duck was kidnapped, the beginning of this episode is very similar, except the beginning both Violet and Lewis are there to tell Clementine about stuff. If Duck was not kidnapped, he'll be around in the beginning checking on everyone. Willie will be upset at Mitch's death, and then be more upset that Clem let Lewis and Violet get taken, calling her selfish. If Duck was kidnapped, the torturing Abel scene is generally the same, except Clem brings up Duck a few times, and Abel states that Lily was hoping to get her hands on that one. If Duck was not kidnapped, Duck will join Clementine downstairs to torture Abel. Before Duck starts, he'll look at AJ and tell him he might want to leave. It's gonna get messy, but AJ insists on staying, Duck just nodding. They wake Abel up. Abel will call them out, saying they seem inexperienced interrogating, and Duck will just scoff. Abel will say that Lily is coming back no matter what and they better just accept it, giving in. This will anger Duck, refusing to be compared to these raiders again, and he'll use his crowbar to smack Abel as hard as he can in the leg. This will cause Abel to talk a little bit about how they won't give the kids back, especially after casualties. They need the kids to fight a war. This will anger Duck further and he'll smack him with a crowbar again. Abel will now admit he doesn't like stealing the kids, but doesn't have much choice if he wants to be there. Abel will ask to smoke, and Clem can choose to do what with the cigarette. Any of which will cause Abel to cough up blood. Abel will get scared and say he'll give up the location if they promise not to let him turn into a walker. Duck just promises it no matter what. Abel reveals that they were taken on a boat. Before Abel can say anything else, Duck takes him off of the chair and throws him on the floor, standing over him with a crowbar. Abel will look up, pleading him not to do this, to let him keep his face. If Duck killed Kenny in Season 2, he can be convinced by Clem to be nice and let Abel be killed by a knife in the back of the head instead. If Duck didn't kill Kenny in Season 2, Duck will begin to smash Abel's face in with his crowbar no matter what, mirroring Kenny killing Carver in Season 2. After a little bit, you can try to stop Duck or let him keep going. If you try and stop him, you will pull on his arm, but he'll accidentally hit Clementine and realize what he's doing before huffing and storming off. If you let him keep going, he'll go on for just a little bit longer before stopping. The 3 then leave to go scout out the boat. If Duck was kidnapped, Clem, AJ, Willie, Lewis, and Violet will be there scouting the boat. It's very similar to the actual game up until when Clem is looking towards the boat and sees Duck being transported through it, knocking away soldiers whenever they touch him, but reluctantly following. Then Clementine will find Minnie and try to take her captive, but now Lewis and Violet recognize her, both excited. Minnie will reveal she's loyal to the Delta, shocking them both. But if Duck wasn't kidnapped, most of it will be the same up until they see both Lewis and Violet being transported across the boat. Duck will like most of the plan except for James, saying that he thinks James is weird. When Clem finds Minnie, Willie will be the one to recognize her instead of either Lewis or Violet. Minnie will still reveal that she likes the Delta, setting Duck off a bit, but AJ will calm him down. Eventually then, Clem and AJ will go to find James, and if Duck is here, Duck will say he'll go back to the school with Lily to help him find his way, but also implying that he doesn't like James and doesn't want to see him. Either way, if Duck was kidnapped or not, this will be about the same, with just James asking where Duck is. They'll go to the barn and all that Walker stuff and blah 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 blah. Clem and AJ will then make it back to the school. If Duck was kidnapped, this part will be vaguely the same with the whole party. The only difference is Clem will hang out with whoever she hung out with the night before, unless it was Duck, in which case Violet and Lewis will just chill in her room together. And when the song happens at the party, Lewis will play the piano while Violet sings at the same time. If Duck wasn't kidnapped, they'll find the school getting ready for a party, Duck reluctantly thinking that it was a good idea to keep the tension low. He asks how things with James went, and that's when he learns he sent Clem into a barn with walkers and he'll become furious, saying that's reckless. but reluctantly he's happy that he agreed. Duck, Clem, and AJ will be in their room whenever AJ starts talking about his feelings about death and how he thinks about how Clem and Duck might turn into walkers someday. AJ will talk about how he would rather get bitten by them instead of killing them or leaving them. AJ will run out of the room and Duck will ask what that was about, Clem filling him in about James' thoughts about walkers still having people inside. Duck will scoff and say that's stupid, to which Clem can agree or disagree. Duck will sit down on the edge of the bed and ask Clem to sit by him. He'll admit he's terrified of tomorrow, not because of himself, but because he's scared of how easily they manage to take the kids, and he doesn't know what they'll do if they take her or AJ. Duck will then ask Clementine about the future. Clem can answer that she wants to keep moving or stay here, to which Duck will nod to either and just say he's tired of sleeping with one eye open. If Clem hung out with Violet or Lewis the night before, Duck will have a small speech about how they're going to get them back. If Clem hung out with Duck the night before but they remained friends, Duck will raise his hand for a high five, and Clementine can choose to high five him or ignore it in a callback to Season 1. Either way, he'll give a speech about getting the kids back. If Clem hung out with Duck and they romanced, depending on if Clem got a forehead scar or lost her finger in the endings of Season 2, he will either rub her scar or hold that hand. Duck will bring up the motor inn, saying he wishes he could go back to that world where he thought Kenny and Lee could protect them from anything, but he knows that's not the case. He'll whisper quietly and ask her to promise him that they'll both make it back from the plan, to which Clem can promise or say she can't make promises. Duck will be understanding either way. AJ will then walk in and throw a beach ball at them, making them laugh. AJ apologizes and the three make their way to the party. They get directed to talk to Willie about the plan about the bomb. Whether Clem agrees or not, Duck will say this is a good idea. Willie will then apologize to Ten for arguing earlier and they ask Clem for what to name the bomb. If Clem refuses to name the bomb, Duck will step in and suggest the salt lick, confusing the kids, but he just grins as he looks at Clementine, not explaining further. They all sit on the floor and begin to play Ruby's game of looking through the documents of the kids. Duck will get it wrong and Ruby will go off and get more documents and get saddened by seeing all the lost students. She'll find Lewis and Violet's giving the player the option to hear their stories or not. With no one here to play/sing Lewis and Minnie's song, Ten will begin to hum it softly, everyone getting quiet to listen to him humming before he realizes everyone is watching and he stops. Duck will put his hand on his shoulder and tell him to keep going and he'll finish humming, ending the party. Clem will then have her dream with Lee, which happens generally the same except Lee will bring up Duck a couple times. He'll make a few comments about how Duck has been growing depending on how Duck is now, and is happy about their relationship if they've chosen to have one. Or if Duck was kidnapped, Lee will give her extra courage saying she has to save him. AJ will then wake her up and tell her it's time to go. If Duck was kidnapped, most of this part happens about the same except for the talk with James about AJ becoming unstable. He says Duck is causing AJ to become unstable with Clementine shutting it down or not. Now that both Lewis and Violet are here, and if Clem didn't romance either, they all three will hang out on the edge of the forest before the attack. During this time, AJ will hand Clem Duck's crowbar saying he misses Duck, and Clem will say they're gonna get him back. It'll also make sneaking onto the boat slightly harder with one more person needing cover. If Duck wasn't kidnapped, Clem will get the walker to cover themselves in walker guts with James near. James will ask for a moment alone with Clem and Duck will try to come before James reiterates it's just with Clementine. James will bring up how accepting most of them are except for Duck, to which Clem can defend him or not. James will then bring up how AJ is becoming unstable and points out Duck, saying he believes Duck is the main cause. This shocks Clementine, causing her again to defend him or not. The group is now ready to go into action, Duck in charge of holding the bomb now. Duck and Clem will have a moment to themselves in the forest. Clem will warn Duck about how James believes he's corrupting AJ and Duck will get hushed angry, saying he wants to protect AJ and James wants him to go pet some walkers. Clem can choose to say she agrees with James or not. If she doesn't agree, Duck will just nod. If she agrees with James and Duck smashed Abel's head in earlier, he'll look down at his crowbar and back up at Clementine, and quietly say, first it was his dad, now it's him. Clementine can say he's a good man or stay silent. Either way, Duck will be shook. If Duck didn't smash Abel's head in earlier, he'll just huff but agree he could go easier. If they stayed friends, Duck will raise his hand out for a fist bump, to which Clem can fist bump him or hug him, and they'll agree to watch each other's backs. If they romanced, he'll look at her and say if anything goes wrong in there, that she takes AJ and runs, to which she can agree or disagree. Either way, Duck will smile and say he loves her before walking away before she can say anything. They'll cover themselves in the walker guts and Duck will say, it never gets better, does it? And Clem will just say, nope. Clem, Duck, and AJ make it into the ship after going through the herd. If Duck was kidnapped, the beginning of the ship sequence is pretty much the same, except now Lewis and Violet are both here trying not to be detected. If Duck wasn't kidnapped, Clementine will go ahead and look for the boiler room before getting spotted by a raider. If you told Duck that you thought James was right about him, he will just knock the raider out from behind. If you told Duck that you thought he was right, he will kill the raider with his crowbar. Eventually, they find the boiler and plant the bomb inside of it. If Duck was kidnapped, Lewis and Violet say they have to ask Minnie for help. They ask Minnie for help and she agrees, and they all run over to the cells. Omar says to check on Duck first, and when Clem goes in to check on Duck, Minnie knocks her out. If Duck was not kidnapped, they run into Minnie, and Clementine decides the best choice is to ask her, to Duck's dismay. Minnie appears to agree to help and they run over to the cells, but Omar says to check on Lewis, so she goes in to check on him, and Minnie knocks her out. Now we're going to switch the order. If Duck wasn't kidnapped, Clementine will wake up and see Duck pacing back and forth, and when he notices her, he'll run over and check on her. She'll ask what's wrong with Lewis, and that's when Violet chimes in from a different cell across from them, and one with AJ. She'll say that they cut Lewis' tongue out because he wouldn't comply with them. Duck will call her a traitor before Clem asks what he's talking about, and he'll reveal that she wants to stay here. After checking on AJ, AJ will slide them his knife and they'll chip away at the door before being told to stop. If Duck was kidnapped, Clementine will wake up slowly and look around, not seeing Duck anywhere, and she'll go to the door asking where Duck is. Lewis and Violet will say that he got taken away by Minnie whenever she got knocked out and he looked rough. She'll look at AJ, who's in a cell with them, and ask for his knife, which he'll slide over and she'll chip away before being told to stop. If Duck wasn't kidnapped, Lily and Minnie will walk in, demanding to know what happened to Abel. If Duck smashed Abel's head in, he'll be upfront about it, boasting about it. Lily will open the cell door and hold them at gunpoint, saying they're lucky they're useful to be kept alive or else they'd be dead already. She'll bring up Larry before looking at Duck and saying Kenny's half the dad he ever was. She'll then tell the story about how Minnie killed Sophie for the Delta, and Duck will be visibly shocked, angry, but unable to do anything. If Duck was kidnapped, all of that will happen the same, except Duck isn't here yet. If Duck was not kidnapped, Lily will pull Duck out onto the ground and chop his finger off. AJ not able to do anything as his cell is locked, but he will yell that he's going to kill Lily. This causes Lily to throw Duck back in the cell and go over to take AJ out of his and take him away, ordering Minnie to watch the kids and the other to go start the boiler. If Duck was kidnapped, Lily will have Dorian drag Duck in and flop him onto the ground in front of everyone. Duck will be barely conscious and look up at Clem, revealing his eye got beaten in and is covered with a bandage like Kenny's. Lily will say that Duck told her what Kenny went through and knew what she had to do. This will cause AJ to yell that he's going to kill Lily, and Lily leaves Duck half conscious outside the cell and takes AJ, telling Minnie to watch them and Dorian to start the boiler. If Duck was not kidnapped, Violet will not distract Minnie for you, causing a Sim and Omar to cause a distraction for you instead. Clem will get the cell open and tackle Minnie. Not having to open a door open for anyone else to help her, Duck and Clem easily overpower her and knock her out. Clem will go to look for AJ while Duck frees the other students and they check on Lewis, leaving Violet in her cell for now. If Duck was kidnapped, Lewis and Violet will cause a distraction for you while you get the door open. Clem will get out and tackle Minnie, but before she can get the door open that Lewis and Violet are in, she will trip over Duck lying down and Minnie will overpower her, about to stab her. Suddenly she'll get knocked unconscious and Clem will look up to see Duck holding a metal pipe before he falls back down on the floor. Clem will let all the kids out and Duck will urge for her to go get AJ. Clem finds AJ, 10, and James all on the upper deck and they begin fighting Lily, Clem injuring her leg slightly in the process. AJ steps in and stabs Lily in her leg. AJ then manages to get a gun and aims it at Lily. James will encourage him not to do it. But right before AJ is about to make a decision, Duck suddenly bursts through the door, either half conscious and limping if kidnapped or just missing a finger if not kidnapped. Clementine gets the choice to tell him to do it or not, but if Clementine stays silent, Duck will tell AJ what to do. If Duck was kidnapped, he'll tell AJ to shoot no matter what. If Duck was not kidnapped and told by Clementine that James was not right, he'll tell him to shoot. If Duck was not kidnapped and told by Clementine that James was right, he'll tell him not to shoot. If AJ doesn't shoot, Lily will kill James. Either way, the ship suddenly blows up, ending the episode. Episode 4. Take Us Back. Clementine comes to and loses her hat looking around for Duck and AJ, but only sees AJ hanging off the side of the ship. She manages to get down off the ship with AJ before being held up by a bow by someone. Suddenly, Duck smacks him in the side of the head with the crowbar that he found. Clem and AJ hug him and he asks where her hat went, but he says they have to go. If Lily is still alive, they'll run into Lily trying to escape. Clementine can raise her bow, but Duck will make her put it down, saying it's not worth it. Lily will say nothing in this world lasts, and Duck will hold Clem and AJ close and say some things do. Lily will just scoff and disappear into the smoke. The three will run to the shore before getting knocked out by another explosion. Clementine will awaken to Lewis killing a walker near her, and they'll hear Violet call out for help, and they'll run over, and Duck helps her. They'll all go further and find Omar and Asim, Violet saying she lost track of Minnie. Clem spots Ruby and Willie and helps get them back over. Suddenly, Minnie sees them and then gets bit on the arm by a walker. She'll get bit on the cheek and try to throw a grenade towards them before Clem shoots her in the arm, causing Minnie to be surrounded by walkers. AJ spots 10, and Clem, Duck, and AJ make their way towards him, finding a cave. If James is still alive, he'll join them in the cave. James will grab AJ and try to steal him, saying they allowed him to become a killer. AJ will get away, and Duck will walk towards him in anger, similar to the Kenny and Jane fight in Season 2. Before Duck can reach him though, AJ will exclaim he enjoyed killing Lily, shocking everyone. Duck will realize he's been a bad influence and look to Clem to help him convince AJ. James will be mad no matter what with Duck here and storm off to find his own way out. If James is dead, AJ will see his zombified body. AJ will conclude James was wrong and there's nothing left inside and push Clem to the ground. Or if Duck told him what to do, he will push Duck to the ground, demanding to know why he couldn't kill Lily. AJ will bring up Abel or Kenny or any of the other kills that might have occurred, causing Duck to realize what example he's setting if he hasn't yet already. AJ says he's going to kill anyone who tries to kill them, and Duck nods solemnly. Clem can feel how she wants about it. Either way, AJ says he won't enjoy killing anyone else and asks for Trust to hold a gun. Duck leaving it up to Clem, and then they find a way out. The four make their way into the forest and look for a way back to the school. 10 thanks him for helping them out, saying Marlon could never. Then out of the forest, Lewis and Violet step out, informing them that the students made it back to the school. Now all 5 make their way to the bridge. They see a drop about halfway through it and decide they have to jump over it, but right before they can, they hear singing coming from behind. They all turn around and see Minnie walking towards them, covered in blood and bites. Minnie tries to convince 10 to come to her, but he doesn't yet, and the walkers start closing in on everybody, Minnie blending in. Suddenly, Minnie sneak attacks everybody. If Duck is hurt from being kidnapped, he won't be much help in the fight, and neither will Lewis and Violet due to being inexperienced, causing Clem to get her leg chopped open before Clem shoots her down. If Lewis and Violet are hurt from being kidnapped, Duck is still missing his finger from getting it chopped off, causing his crowbar to slip from his hand, and Minnie chops Clem's leg open before she manages to shoot her. With Minnie gone either way, AJ will jump across first, followed by Clem and then Duck, leaving 10, Violet, and Lewis on the other side. 10 doesn't want to leave Minnie, and Lewis and Violet try to get him to jump across. If AJ was trusted to make decisions on his own, he will now shoot 10, saving both Lewis and Violet. If AJ wasn't trusted to make decisions on his own, and Duck was not kidnapped, Violet will sacrifice herself for Lewis and 10, feeling bad that she tried to betray them. If AJ wasn't trusted to make decisions and Duck was kidnapped, Lewis will sacrifice himself, making himself feel worth something after hiding from responsibility. Either way, whoever lives gets separated from Duck, Clem, and AJ. They may get to the rock wall, and Duck and AJ climb up first so Duck can try and help lift her up, but before he can, she gets bit. After getting up, Clementine collapses knowing what might have happened, and Duck tells her to tell him it's not true. Clementine checks and confirms. This throws Duck into a denial frenzy, saying maybe she's immune, maybe it won't happen to her, and Clem will tell him to shut up, they have to keep going. They find the barn that James kept the walkers in, and the 3 of them go inside. Depending on if Duck was beaten brutally while kidnapped or not, he will either be helping AJ out with the activities or not. Eventually, AJ manages to get all the entrances shut, with Duck either helping him out with half of them if he was uninjured except for his finger, or only one if he was injured. Clem directing AJ with the rest. AJ says they need to get up to the 2nd story, and Clem seeing Duck here actually tries to agree, but Duck is either too much in pain or unable to get a good grip because of his finger. Clementine, realizing it's pointless, starts making AJ recite the rules while Duck is getting increasingly frustrated, mad at himself he can't help more. Duck reluctantly kills a walker and begins to cover himself and AJ in the guts. Clementine then gets to choose if they leave or kill her. If she decides for them to kill her, she gets to choose if it's Duck or AJ. If she stays silent, the game will decide for you based on your past decisions. Either way, Duck and AJ will get emotional as Clementine tells them goodbye, and if Duck is romanced, he will kiss her one final time before standing back up and bringing the axe down, or AJ bringing the axe down. It will then flash back to the McCarroll Ranch, with Clem and Duck trying to make their way inside while Clementine controls the horse before it gets killed and Clem and Duck fly off of it. They go through groups of people trying to kill them or pleading for death. Duck being forgiving at this point, not hardened again from being alone with Clem, eventually they manage to find the nursery and Clem shoots the woman protecting the locker and they get inside and find AJ. They all three find the car, Duck driving as Clem sits in the back seat with AJ. If Kenny died in Season 3, Duck will make it a point to have his seatbelt on. AJ manages to recognize them and smiles as all three of them drive off. Back in the present, AJ will be near the stream fishing and find Clem's hat with the help of Rosie. If 10 died, he will find 10's zombified body and either puts him down or lets him go off. If he puts him down, Duck will walk up saddened and pat AJ on the shoulder, telling him he's sorry. If he lets him wander off, AJ will find Duck and say he's ready to go back to the school. If 10 is alive, he will already be back at the school, as in this universe, Lewis or Violet was watching him. Either way, they both will head back to the school. After dropping off the fish, it is revealed that Clementine lived and is missing a leg, now slightly more believable with Duck being here. AJ will be excited and hug her, noticing she's walking on crutches now. Duck will walk up and either hug or kiss her depending on if they're romanced or not. AJ offers her her hat back and she declines. They all three go over and find the new swing set up. Clem will push AJ for a bit before Duck tells Clem to get on the tire swing too. She reluctantly agrees and Duck pushes them both for a moment before Clem almost falls and decides it's time to go eat. The group will be laughing at the dinner table, and if Duck is wearing an eye patch now, he'll make a joke that Clem and him would make a good pirate if they can bind. Clem and Duck, and possibly Lewis Violet, will discuss how a group of survivors were spotted nearby, asking Duck and AJ to go along to see if they were friendly. Clem, Duck, and AJ all go to talk for a moment, Clementine asking AJ if he thought they did a good job at raising and protecting him. Either way, she'll thank AJ for convincing Duck to help save Clem from her bite. AJ will walk off, leaving Duck and Clem alone to go back to the dorm. He'll place the hat down on the dresser, and it's the end. Again, sorry if this was not the best video. I've barely played Season 4. I feel like I hopefully did a good job, but sorry if I mischaracterized anyone.